Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. Happy Friday. My name is Craig Hickman. I am the Senator for Senate District 14, which includes 11 towns in Southern Kennebec County, including Winthrop, my hometown. Today, we have 3 public hearings on our agenda, followed by 13 work sessions. For anyone who is listening in, we will not be taking up the work session on LD 1231 today. We will announce the order of the work sessions at the beginning of our work session hour. In the meanwhile, we will begin with committee introductions. Today, Senator Guerin.
Good morning. I am Senator Stacey Guerin, representing Senate District 10 in Southern Penobscot County.
Senator Miramont.
Hello, Dave Miramont, Senate District 12, which is Knox County, except for the town of Washington. County seat is Rockland. Good morning.
Representative Cuddy.
Good morning. My name is Scott Cuddy. I represent House District 98, which is Winterport, Frankfort, Searsport, and Swanville.
Representative Morris.
Good morning. I am Representative Joshua Morris. I represent House District 75, which is Turner, Leeds, and Livermore.
Representative Drinkwater.
Greetings from sunny Milford, where the temperature is currently 32 degrees. District 121.
Representative Bradstreet.
Good morning. I'm Representative Dick Bradstreet from House District 80. That's Vassalboro, Windsor, Somerville, and part of Augusta.
Representative Warren.
Good morning. My name is Sophie Warren, and I represent my hometown here in Scarborough Coastal District 29.
Chairman Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Representative Mike Sylvester. I represent District 39, which is the Eastern Peninsula portion of Portland and the windswept folks of Casco Bay. I will also be timing today during the public hearing. So if you are here to testify or while you're testifying, you want to be in gallery view so that you can see when I hold up my little phone at the beginning to show that I'm timing, and then again at 30 seconds so that you can see the countdown. And when we get to the end of it, I will gently remind you to that your time is over and to summarize your thoughts.
Thank you. I will be going and coming back today. I have to be on VLA, so when I do leave, you will be in great hands with Chairman Sylvester. This session is being broadcast live on YouTube. It's also being recorded. It's also being broadcast live on our audio site. And again, we will be hearing from the public. We'll be taking information from the public. Our committee members know the rules. If you are in the waiting room, you will have to go through a wormhole before you come into the room, so just be patient. You are still on. Representative Bradstreet, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to inform you that Representative Prescott is still having internet issues. He's trying hard to get on. He may join us partway through if he's successful.
I appreciate that. It's all windy today. If you are going to testify, make sure that the name on your screen is the name that we've signed up for so that we can find you easily and admit you to the room. Please do not use the chat function for any other reason today except for technical issues or questions about the order of the day. And with that, I will open making sure that we have all of our bill sponsors in the room. Yes. And with that, I will open the public hearing on LD 886, resolved to encourage employment in the direct care workforce, sponsored by Representative Jessica Fay of Raymond. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning, Senator Hickman. That wormhole still gets me. It is after having done this a number of times, it's still a little bit weird. Thank you very much for having me today. And I just have to take 1 second and say a proud moment that my little tomato seedlings now have starting their secondary leaves. So I feel like I wanted to let Farmer Hickman know that.
I appreciate that very much. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. Pretty proud of myself, actually. So I am Representative Jessica Fay and Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. I'm Jessica Fay. I represent the people of House District 66, which is parts of the towns of Casco, Poland, and Raymond. Today, it is my privilege to present to you LD 886, Resolve to Encourage Employment in the Direct Care Workforce. This is the first of two proposals that I'll be presenting to you this session regarding the caregiving workforce. LD 886 is taken word for word from recommendation number 7 from the report of the Commission to Study Long-Term Care Workforce Issues, of which I served as House Chair in late 2019. For your convenience, there is a link to the report in my written testimony. The issues the Commission discussed were complex, and as I reflect on the work we did, I wonder if we should have requested a title change to something like the Commission to Study Direct Care Workforce Issues, because we focused on the workers and the people they serve and less on the setting. I'm always willing and grateful to talk about that work in detail and encourage you to read the report. I would be happy to follow up with any of the committee members if you'd like to have a discussion about the work. There are a number of significant impediments the Commission identified for entry into this foundational workforce. Indeed, low wages were the #1 issue that we encountered, and that must be addressed by increasing reimbursement rates to providers who serve our most vulnerable populations, who are significant users of direct care workers. While wages and rates are significant drivers of the crisis, we also identified others. The way that society perceives the work and values the work also stands in the way of people considering joining the caregiving workforce. This bill could actually help us achieve the goal of raising the profile and status of the work, which could then also lead to higher wages for direct care workers. There's a perception in the general public that jobs in the caregiving workforce are dead end or somehow unskilled labor, and nothing could be further from the truth. Helping people who need assistance, either physically or emotionally, with activities of daily living takes empathy and specific training. Many people who do this work report a high sense of purpose and job satisfaction, according to a report by Dr. Sandy Butler, who served on the Commission. In my written testimony, I've included a link to a presentation made by Dr. Butler to the Commission in September of 2019. Historically, the work of caregiving has been done by women, people of color, and immigrants. And historically, this rewarding work has been undervalued and underpaid. Without a direct care workforce, people who need help suffer, can be injured, and even die for lack of that care. Without access to caregivers, families must figure out how to earn a living and care for their loved ones. This can hinder economic opportunities and add to Maine's other workforce issues. The dynamic is similar to the one that we find in the early child care workforce. And I have a link to a report from PHI International about racial and gender disparities within the direct care workforce. PHI is an organization that, quote, works to transform elder care and disability services. They foster dignity, respect, and independence for all who receive care and all who provide it. As the nation's leading authority on the direct care workforce, PHI promotes quality direct care jobs as the foundation for quality care. They have a significant body of research spelling out some of the solutions to the caregiving workforce shortage crisis, and along with staff from NCSL also presented to the Long-Term Care Workforce Commission. One of the significant takeaways from that presentation was the 5 pillars of job quality. And one of the primary keys to those pillars is high quality direct care jobs should have quality training, fair compensation, quality supervision and support, respect and recognition, and real opportunity. By creating respect for and recognition that caregiving is valued through a campaign, we can encourage more people to consider joining the workforce. There's a link in my testimony as well to that 5 pillars of direct care job quality. In attracting new people to the workforce, we face the challenge of both perception and compensation. This committee isn't in the position to raise the pay for direct care workers specifically, but through a well-run multimedia campaign developed with an aspirational and inspiring marketing strategy, Maine could lead the nation in raising up the perceived value and desirability of this work. I applaud DHHS and the Maine Long-Term Care Ombudsman for taking a step in this direction. They are currently running a 40-second ad on local TV stations. The ad shows people in caregiving settings and then asks those interested to visit a national jobs website that the department is currently using to try to connect job seekers to employers. Understanding that they haven't been directed to do this work yet, it is heartening to see the initiative taken. An effective marketing campaign begins with a strategy which takes research to develop, includes a launch, complementary ads placed in places where different constituencies will consume them, and then inspires action or a change in attitude. We have taken on campaigns to encourage people to visit Maine, to encourage people to quit smoking, to encourage people to relocate here for work, among others, and we can do the same in order to elevate direct care work. The nature, length, and depth of direct care workforce shortage is a crisis that impacts every one of us, either because we may one day need assistance, either in a home-based setting or in an assisted living or nursing home, or because we love someone who might need help with the activities of daily living. Whether it's caring for a person with physical, intellectual, or developmental disabilities or someone with mental health needs, our caregiving workforce allows each person to be afforded the opportunity to live in the most independent way possible. And I believe there are many people out there who have the qualities that are necessary to be a successful as a caregiver. They just haven't considered as a viable profession. I thank the committee for your time and I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
All right, I am going to grab the gavel. I did not think that Senator Hickman had left yet, but it appears he's over at VLA. So Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative, for being here. I see that you're trying to include 3 departments, but it's your intention then that the Department of Labor take the lead on this. And
It is.
I'm assuming I might have missed it in your testimony, but are you contacting the other departments as well through their committees?
Well, the resolve directs the Department of Labor to lead the work, and that's the way that the language in the commission report reads. So so that's the direction that this resolve goes in. I would hope that they would, because some of these workers are licensed and regulated through Department of Health and Human Services, and and DECD has some experience running these types of campaigns. I was hoping that they would collaborate, work together to make an effective campaign.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for the good representative? Representative Warren.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for bringing this bill forward and for your testimony. I'm wondering if you could speak, or maybe someone behind you would speak more to how the outreach or materials will be differentiated or intentionally trying to provide specific outreach to different, maybe historically underrepresented communities.
You know what, Representative Warren, I think that's a really great question. And the commission did recommend that that work be done and that we do outreach across populations, ages, genders. So I think while directing the department to do the work, we didn't necessarily spell out exactly how they should do it. I think that's something, that we weren't in a position to really say, exactly how to do it. So, would be happy to make some suggestions, but I think that's something that in the process, maybe through an RFP, that they could determine.
Are there any other questions for Representative Fay? Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for joining a bit late this morning. I had some computer issues. Thanks for the bill, Representative Fay. and just being a newly elected representative, I'm not real familiar with the original commission and the findings. So when you talk about the barriers that people feel to employment, was there what was the nature of that research? Was it individual interviews? Was it a survey of some kind? How did you learn about that group? And then have there already been some ways identified that are best to reach them, the potential workforce?
So I think in my written testimony, Representative Geary, you'll find a copy of the report, and there are lots of reference materials that you can kind of go down that rabbit hole in if you would like. And I would be happy to go down that rabbit hole with you anytime. I think to try to do that here with the entire committee, and I think Representative Sylvester and Representative Cuddy and Representative Bradstreet, Senator Guerin, other folks that were on this committee last session, I did I think it was right before we adjourned for COVID, a briefing on the report. I'm happy to do that again if that's the pleasure of the committee, but there's a lot of research out there. PHI is a great resource, and there is links to their website in my written testimony as well. So I know that doesn't exactly answer your question per se, but I think it gives you some resources to follow up on.
Are there any other questions? Representative Fay, I have a couple.
Sure.
Yeah, first of all, just thank you for your work. As you know, I was a younger man, spent years working and advocating for this group of workers. And you're right, there's, there are a few harder working folks, who do get by with less than this group. But I guess what I'm interested in right now is this, my second question will clarify, but this seems like very tied into whether the reimbursement rate goes up, as to whether the campaign will be truly successful. And so I'm just curious whether or not all the boats are pulling in the same direction in order to get this done. Having seen the boats pull in different directions and what happens then, I'm just curious how those bills are going.
So that's a really sort of big question. And if you'll allow me, I'll do my chicken and egg dance.
Okay.
Which is, I think, part of the hesitancy of people to join the workforce is because the work is low paid. And I think part of the reason why the work is low paid is because the work isn't as valued and isn't as lifted up as it could be. So I think we probably need to do both things simultaneously in order to really address this crisis. It is a feedback loop that is problematic. We hear a lot about economic development and talk about good paying jobs and building our economy, and I think that's a really, really important discussion to have, and we absolutely need to attract good paying jobs to Maine, develop them here. But one of the things that I think about when I hear that conversation is we have folks that are working really hard right now, or who could be joining this workforce because it really is rewarding work. And I encourage everyone to read Dr. Butler's report. Is that these folks that are here working now are working in these, I consider them highly skilled jobs, and they're not being paid enough. So we can't really call them good paying jobs, and then we can't, attract more people to the workforce. So that's a very long way of answering your question, as to whether people are rowing in the same direction. The Health and Human Services Committee has been hearing a lot of bills about rate increases, and they have been voting some of those out of committee. I've noticed a couple of them have come out of committee unanimously. I don't think they've heard all of the bills yet, I will have a bill sometime in the next couple of weeks that will be additionally more of the recommendations from the Long-Term Care Workforce Commission. So we'll have that that discussion. I'm hopeful that we can move the needle in ways that we weren't able to do in the 129th because we adjourned.
That gets to where I was headed for sure. Now, you know, and to any of the department heads who may be listening, I would encourage them to all row in the same direction. And any help this committee can do to do that, I think it was also what was behind Representative Bradstreet's question to make sure that there was coordination. I guess specifically to your bill, who would you say is the primary target of this bill? Is it potential direct care workers? Is it potential direct care clients? Is it the citizenry at large? Is it all of those? So I think it's important to sort of, you know, as
Yep.
to frame this so we know who the target is.
I agree. I think it's to encourage people to join the direct care workforce. But I do think that is all the people who potentially could join that workforce. Again, the recommendation, you know, suggests that we target older people and even younger people, and that we look at different populations. The workforce is highly gendered, and you know, the work is very personal. And one of the things that we discussed briefly was that if you're, you know, not comfortable with a female caregiver, there really aren't you know, too many men doing this work. And so we're hoping that we can broaden and expand the pool of people who are interested.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I agree that you know, that we have to be thinking about all of them, all of those populations at the same time. And
Absolutely,
thank you again.
absolutely.
Are there any other questions for the good representative? Seeing none, thank you so much for bringing this bill forward.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the committee. I'm happy to be available for any questions and for the work session if you'd like.
Of course, yes, we will make sure that that you are there. Excellent. Before we move on, Representative Geer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Tracy Geer. I represent House District 9, which is Kennebunkport and Coastal Biddeford and Kennebunk.
And Representative Rader.
Hi, I'm Amy Rader. I represent District 125, which is a portion of Bangor.
Excellent. Did I miss anybody else who snuck in? Representative Prescott didn't sneak. Okay. All right. Very good. All right. So, Alyssa, who is first up to testify here?
We have Representative Arford as well.
Oh, great. We can co-sponsor. Excellent. If you could let the next three into the room, that would be great.
Will do.
Welcome, Representative. You are on mute currently.
Yeah,
There you go. Perfect. Welcome to the committee, and you have the floor.
thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be before your committee. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and respected colleagues of the Labor and Housing Committee. I am Poppy Arford, representative of District 49 in Brunswick, testifying as a co-sponsor in support of LD 866, resolved to encourage employment in the direct care workforce. Please know that I do not have an expert understanding of the direct care workforce issues. I am testifying this morning because of the understanding I've gained from members of my Brunswick community and professionals in the direct care field that this bill is needed as part of a package of bills recommended by the Commission to Study Long-Term Care Workforce Issues. I am also a person who cares profoundly about the well-being of our statewide neighbors who depend on direct care workers for the daily care they need to live well. In the Commission's January 2020 report, you will find a section entitled Direct Care Workforce Recruitment and Retention. Recommendation number 7 in this section states, direct the Department of Labor in coordination with the Department of Economic and Community Development and the Department of Health and Human Services to develop and implement a multimedia public service campaign that promotes direct care worker jobs as a career choice. Ensure that the campaign materials include new Mainers, men, younger people, including high school students, older people, and individuals with disabilities. And this is found on page 14 of the Commissioner's report. For the multimedia campaign, what my understanding is that for the multimedia public service campaign, for which LD 886 provides to be impactful and truly make a difference, the critically important issues that are creating the statewide direct care worker crisis must be addressed. The bills recommended by the Commission and submitted by our colleagues for consideration this session accomplish this. I have listed a few of the bills below. Please join me in supporting LD 866 as part of this package. I am happy to answer any questions you may have for me. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Representative Arford, for being here today. Are there any questions for the good representative? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, and if we'll let you know about the work session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next we are going to hear from Tom Goodwin, and then Jess Maurer, and then Jeff McCabe. Mr. Goodwin, you can unmute and looks like maybe he has disappeared momentarily. So why don't we move to Jess Maurer? And we'll come back to Mr. Goodwin.
And I can't seem to start my video. Oh, I can now. Excellent. Thank you. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Jess Maurer, and I am the Executive Director of the Maine Council on Aging. We are a broad multidisciplinary network of more than 100 organizations, businesses, municipalities, and older community members who are working to ensure we can all live healthy, engaged, and secure lives with choices and opportunities as we age in our homes and in community settings. We are in support of LD 886. As part of a stakeholder process we hosted in 2016 to identify systemic solutions to our severe and pervasive direct care workforce shortage, a top priority we identified was the need to actively promote direct care workers as vital to our economy, working caregivers, and older and disabled people who continue to contribute to society in a multitude of ways. This stakeholder process led us to pursue the legislation to create the Commission to Study Long-Term Care Workforce Issues, a commission that you already heard met in the fall of 2019 and issued a report in December of that year. COVID obviously hit in 2020, and we had to postpone the critical conversation about solving our direct care workforce shortage, but make no doubt that the COVID crisis has made it even more important that we invest in promoting and building a quality essential care workforce ready to meet Maine's care needs. Here's why. Right now, we have more than 300,000 people in Maine who are over 65. That's 27% of our adult population. 25% or 75,000 of those people who are 65 now are projected to need more than 1 year of paid support over the remainder of their lifetime. Thus, unless we act now, most of the people who will need care in the future will not be able to find the care they need. More importantly, people who need care are not getting the care they need. In any given week, about 10,000 hours of approved care for personal support specialists go undelivered to about 850 older and disabled Mainers, including more than 500 older Mainers who are nursing home eligible who receive no staffing at all. I will tell you that this 10,000 hour deficit has more than doubled since 2016 and shows absolutely no sign of slowing. There are also 1,000 people who are waiting to access the Homemaker program. In addition, out of the 1,650 current Homemaker clients, 250 have no staffing at all. There are empty beds in nursing homes and assisted living facilities due to staffing shortages, while at the same time, we are literally warehousing older people in hospitals who cannot be discharged to home or to a facility because of staffing shortages. COVID has taken an enormous emotional toll on care workers in nursing homes in particular. Many have left or plan to leave after the health crisis is over. There is also a sense among home care workers who could not get protective gear early on and who were never prioritized for vaccination that they are undervalued and they are now experiencing a significant morale problem. LD 886 is a simple but critical strategy that the Commission to Study Long-Term Care Workforce Issues determined should be an immediate action. A key component to addressing the direct care workforce shortage is attracting new workers and elevating the importance of the work to society. I can't emphasize enough that it's both of those things. The Commission—
Ms. Maurer, unfortunately, that is the end of your 3 minutes. Could you summarize your thoughts for us in a couple sentences?
You bet. You bet. I'm just going to say that we have to do all that we can to grow our essential care workforce in Maine, and that LD 886 is a crucial component to making that happen. And I'm happy to answer any questions, including some that were asked earlier.
Thank you very much for being here. Are there any questions for Ms. Maurer from the committee? Representative Warren.
Thank you very much, and for your testimony. Would you be able to speak at all to how maybe there are different strategies to provide outreach or campaign materials to different historically underrepresented communities in this field?
Absolutely, and there are absolutely different strategies needed. As Representative Fay mentioned, the folks who really were identified as people who are potential to join this workforce are new Mainers, are older people, and are men, are young people, and are people with disabilities. And all of those populations have sort of different ways that we would want to engage with them. More importantly, globally, people need to know that we need workers in this workforce and that it's an honorable profession. But specifically, what happens, and I'll just say, you know, we have a huge number of informal family caregivers here in Maine. It's about 178,000 people are informal caregivers. Many of them, unfortunately, leave the workforce to take care of an older relative right now. And these can be people in their 40s and 50s who've had one career and now are shifting to another career. They're people who sometimes learn the most incredible skills for 2 or 3 years, taking care of a parent with dementia, a parent with Parkinson's, or any other issue. When they stop that caregiving, they need a break, but they are already trained workers who could join this workforce if they knew that they were needed. And I'll tell you that some people find they have a passion for it while they are providing direct care for a loved one or a neighbor even. So that's one population. We talked an awful lot during the commission about ways to engage folks with disabilities who are actively looking for work and ways to be supported in that work. And that would take a very different strategy, which would be about building skills for those folks to get them to join the workforce. But obviously, we also need a very specific strategy to addressing issues related to new Mainers, including competency, core competency in training. There's just a multitude of strategies that need to be happening, but the men piece is a really big one, and also younger students. We talked about getting high school students interested in joining these jobs, college students interested in joining these jobs. So that's a social media campaign, right? I mean, we're really talking about how do we get to young people where they live these days. It's not a TV ad on Channel 6. So I think it's different strategies for different populations, and we have to do them all.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Maurer? Representative Geer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for being here, Ms. Maurer. The question I have has to do with the balance of the need for this workforce in at-home settings versus care settings. And is that something that the commission looked at and has recommendations on, specifically with regards to, I'm thinking about the issue of isolation, social isolation, and so many elder folks, kind of stuck in their homes without contact. I'm just curious as to the dynamic of that in-home versus care setting care, and if that was considered and looked at.
Absolutely. And the really nice thing about the commission was that they, for the first time, we included older adults and people with intellectual disabilities and obviously disabled people and the people that care for them. So this is a really big conversation we had. And so we talked consistently about care across all settings. It is something that we have been talking about for almost a decade now. Because of our shrinking workforce, you can't put a lot of effort and money and time into developing one segment of this workforce, i.e. people who, provide care in group homes for people with intellectual disabilities, or just people who provide home care for older people, or people who just work in nursing homes. If you focus on one segment of that workforce too much, you draw all the people away, and we have to have a balance. We have to make sure we have an essential care workforce, a quality essential care workforce that's taking care of everybody we need taken care of. And so we need to sort of, as Representative Sylvester says, we say we have to raise all boats together. And so we talked about the different jobs across all of those settings. And there were lots of things that the recommendations in the report are for all of those settings. And this is one of those pieces, right? I mean, we need to get the word out, and we've known this for a long time, that these jobs are that we need workers in these jobs, and that these are good and honorable jobs. Obviously, to Representative Sylvester's question, we also need to make sure they're paid better. And that is the other part of the strategy. But we absolutely, and we're even now talking all the time with behavioral health folks as well, really starting to say we need to talk about this as an essential care workforce across all settings, so that we're making sure we're not taking anything away from any setting or group of people who need care, and that we're really focused on again, just reinforcing the care workforce across all settings.
Great, thank you. And just a follow-up, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Of course.
And I'm curious as to whether there are workers in this workforce who float between different delivery models, in say some days they're going into the home and other days they might be working in some kind of a care setting. Does that happen, or is that a one strategy that could be used here?
And it's absolutely a strategy that we talked about, and particularly it doesn't happen that often, but we really think it needs to happen more often. I should say, by the way, because I didn't, but we also talked about the adult day programs and the adult family care homes, which are a little bit of a unique setting in Maine, but we included them as well. But particularly home care folks, because this is what happens with home care folks, is they, particularly rurally, you have one person who may take care of just two people or three people over the course of a week. And if one of those people goes into the hospital for an extended period of time, that person is all of a sudden not working full time. They're all of a sudden, out the pay. They may have actually gone to the door and knocked and found out that they weren't there, and there's no notification process. And we absolutely identified the need to be able to have that worker click, I'm available today, and go work in a nursing home in that same area, to fill in, and they get paid, the nursing home gets staff. We are not there yet, but it's definitely one of the recommendations in the report.
Great, thank you.
Representative Warren.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the strategy and how it's connected to some of it. From my understanding of the report around this, the one having a living wage and certain other needs for this field workers. I guess maybe again that chicken and egg thing. Can you speak to, maybe do you know of other states that the types of outreach that you're speaking about, kind of how it leads to higher wages or other, I guess, considerations that were determined in the report?
That's a big question. There have been other attempts to, sort of elevate the workforce. We think, all of these things have to happen. We have to have more pay. But I will say, there are people who work in one low wage setting that if they knew these jobs were, and these are all critical components, right? If they knew that these jobs were a pathway to other careers, and that there might be some support in that pathway for them to choose that. There might be some free training to get into those jobs. So there's a multitude of, even if you didn't raise salaries, you do have people who are working at this level right now for Tim Hortons or for Walmart so we have low wage earners who could be in these jobs but don't know that job is available, don't believe they have the qualifications to do it, don't realize that it could create a pathway to another job and increased earnings. This report that Representative Fay mentioned, that she included a link in her testimony, the 5 pillars of quality, really lays out the pathway for Maine in how we can begin to build this workforce. We really just need to find the collective will to put all of these components into place. They all fit together. They are critically important. This is even when after COVID hit and we surveyed all of our members who work in this area and said, what is your priority now? Given COVID, given where the legislature is gone, we're dealing with all of this challenge. What is the things that we can do now, right now during COVID? And they all said, promote the workforce. Like, this is a critical component of it. Just having people understand that these jobs are currently available, that they are useful to society, that they are meaningful, and that they can lead to other jobs. A critical component. If we could get a living wage, all the better, which would attract obviously more people. I think about this as law enforcement and fire and rescue, right? They're dead end jobs if you wanted to think about it that way, right? They're really, besides becoming a detective or a state police officer or a police chief or a sheriff, there's not a lot of advancement in law enforcement. And yet when our kid says, I want to be a firefighter, or I want to be a police officer, we say, great. But we don't say that. If somebody says, I want to be a direct care worker, we say, oh, there's better jobs than that. So a lot of this is really about elevating the importance of these jobs to our economy, to our workforce. I mean, as I mentioned, there are family caregivers who are working. If they can't find carers to take care of their parents during the day, they stop working. This is
Thank you, Ms. Maurer. I'm just going to check in. Representative Drinkwater, did you have a question?
Thank you, sir. She touched upon my question.
Perfect. Very good. Oh, Representative Warren, did you have a follow-up? I'm sorry, didn't see your hand was still up.
I did want to follow up. Thank you very much for your response. And I wanted to know, do you feel that for the goals of this resolve, that there are ideal models for the types of outreach that, especially to historically underrepresented communities like men in the way that you're speaking of, are there models from other states, for example, that you're using in this instance?
I can't say that I have one in particular that I would look to, but I would look to PHI to help us actually.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Maurer? I have a couple quick ones. So I guess I'm interested in the homemaker program specifically. I know historically it had a higher rate and it was often used to try to bring up some of the other rates that were lower. Is the rate there, and are we still looking at the same wait list that we were 20 years ago?
Oh, it's the homemaker program is in real trouble. So there are 1,000 people waiting to get in, and there are about 200 people currently on the program who are not staffed. The challenge for the homemaker program, so that's a fully state-funded program, and they get one rate, right, to do the eligibility and sort of the intake and the care coordination and the staffing. And so they have to pay everything within that rate. It doesn't create enough for them to now, because we increased home care rates, all good. We like that. We increased home care, thank you. They can't now afford to contract with home care agencies. They can't pay their higher rate. So they've actually lost a number of avenues to staffing, and have been trying everything. I'll tell you, the new head of that program has told me if they could, I mean, we're helping them do outreach to like UNE and college students. They're like, if we could just get 10 hours, we could get 10 hours of somebody's time, it would make a huge difference to that program. And I think that's one of the reasons this outreach is so important. And, you know, like the multi-tiered strategy is to get that message out. If you just have 10 hours to give, you know, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just quickly, I know we lost a lot of providers, you know, during the dip in rates and those sorts of things. And so how is that looking? Are we, you know, are we 50% of what we need? Are we 75% of what we need? Are we 30% of what we need?
I would say we're probably at about, I mean, maybe 60% of what we need. And the reason I say that is what I have learned over the last year from providers, particularly home care providers, is that they are employing everyone they can employ within the funding that they have. And they have tried everything, I mean, everything to get more people in. And basically the price point doesn't work. They tell me they're not going to bring more workers in at what they're paying. And that just means all those people I said who are not getting staff now, they're just not going to get staffed. We don't have a plan for staffing those people. And we have to prepare for the increase in demand that we're going to have in the future.
For sure. Thank you so much. Representative Gear, did you have another question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Ms. Maurer, do we have statistics about these jobs as pathways for careers in healthcare more generally for younger folks who might be looking? It sounds like there's work with UNE, so it might be part of a clinical part of someone's study. Is that happening?
So we have career pathways for a lot of folks, particularly the CNAs in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. They have been connected to healthcare pathways in the past, and there has been some work with DHS and DOL around that. Personal support specialists, PSSs, which are and also DSPs, which are, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget the name. That's what the folks who take care of folks with intellectual disabilities, direct service DSPs, providers, I think. Yeah, direct service providers. Those jobs in particular have never been tied to healthcare jobs ever. And it's the first rung, including homemakers haven't either. You know, I mean, it's the first rung, and that's the thing we've been working with DOL and DHHS is to say, first of all, let's create a universal worker. You know, that's one credential that can move easily, as to your point, back and forth, right? Can go to be a DSP and a PSS and a CNA at any given time. That's key, and they are working on that. And the other is to, in fact, tie these jobs to all kinds of health. Phlebotomist, right? I mean, it's easy to see. You could go from, you know, from that. There's a lot of these low-level healthcare jobs which are desperately in need, and so we really need to build that career pathway out. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Warren.
Just for my clarity, is that universal system, I think you mentioned it's in the works, so that's something, so there currently isn't that strategy set in place about these types of jobs being pathways to further employment, or just for my clarity, I apologize for my ignorance, but thank you.
Yeah, no, as I said, a number of the facility-based care, so assisted living and nursing home level, you know, the lower level folks, they have been tied to healthcare jobs. There is a career pathway for healthcare that has been created in the state for a number of years. It's the lower level home care workers who have never been tied to that pathway, and the Department of Health and Human Services and Department of Labor are collaborating on that, as well as a universal worker, but neither of those things have been created yet. And that is part of the recommendations of the commission's report as well. And they've been working on that since like last June.
Are there any other questions for the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Maurer, as always, for all your work and the information you've been able to give us today. And we appreciate you being here, and we will send you, make sure you sign up for the work session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yep. I still don't see Todd Goodwin, perhaps because I called him Tom. But before we move on to Mr. McCabe, Representative Pebworth, did you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Pebworth. I represent House District 133 in the Blue Hill Peninsula, and I'm pleased to say that my bill on a task force for young adults with disabilities passed unanimously out of education.
Congratulations, Representative. And Representative Cuddy, were you here earlier, or did you get a chance to introduce yourself?
I did, but I took off my jacket, so I look totally different. I think that's what it is.
You do indeed. Dapper is the word I would use. All right, and with that, we will welcome the Honorable Mr. McCabe.
Happy Friday, Chair Sylvester, members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Jeff McCabe. I serve as the Legislative and Political Director for Maine Service Employees Association. We are here in support of LD 886. We actually view this as sort of one piece in the puzzle. You've heard from the folks that are truly experts on this issue. We have typically advocated for raising of wages within this workforce. We have advocated for increased reimbursements. And I will say, though, that this is an important piece of the puzzle. I also really appreciate the comments earlier and questions in regards to outreach to the possible workforce, and I think that this is definitely one step in the future. So some of those pieces could be something that are taken care of in the RFP for this work. And I also think it's important to look at the potential workforce and develop some stakeholder groups to really look at this outreach effort. I also wanted to say that, while many of these agencies do important work, they are all not created equal. So it's important to recognize that. And it's important to recognize, too, there is a role for the state to support these agencies in training, in outreach, and also to help make this field more competitive. I think if any of the folks here on the committee, reach out to their federal delegation, this is something that Maine's federal delegation is working on. It is something that the current administration is proposing to address in a number of ways on the federal level. And Maine, at this current time, is expected to get a large amount of federal money, and it's issues like this that could benefit from one-time investments. So, I think it's really important to look at this issue, to look at the other bills and the other committees. And I'm glad to see this conversation in this committee where I spend the bulk of my time. Often it's just occurring in the Health and Human Services Committee. So, those issues of reimbursement rates, those issues of wages are important. I also wanted to say that this work, to me, complements some of the educational components that are occurring at the community college system. So I think it would behoove the committee to, try to look at some of that effort as well. And I will say, overall, the state needs to look at also providing folks in this workforce training directly. Many of these agencies are just on a barely break even sort of model. And I think there is a role for the state to provide, training for young people, training for folks that might be re-entering the workforce, and some of the other potential candidates you've heard about. So excited to be part of this conversation. Happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Consider the committee so behooved. Are there any questions for Mr. McCabe from the committee? Representative Cuddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. McCabe, for the testimony. Listening to the testimony this morning and listening to yours, it sort of seems like the thing that is making all this very difficult is the reimbursement rates. The agencies are unable to pay appropriately. They don't have the monies to train. and setting up systems to take care of each of those things seems far more complex than raising reimbursement rates. Would you, personally, would you prefer to see, obviously, reimbursement rates plus a campaign to make sure people know that this work is good work and needs to be done would both be ideal. But if you gotta juggle those two things, where do you put your priority?
Yeah, thank you, Representative, for the question. It's interesting. The bill sponsor has really, immersed herself in these issues. And I do have a great deal of respect for the bill sponsor being able to sort of separate out these issues and present them individually. I think in an ideal world, all of these things could be part of a, one bill, or they could be part of, say, a supplemental budget. I do think, reimbursement rates are probably, if I was to say, the number one priority for us as an organization, that recruitment piece. I also think to Representative Warren's question, it is really important, and this is something we are doing as an organization. Looking at redesigning our outreach materials and looking at sort of who are the folks that need to be reached, and making sure that underserved communities are also part of the equation and part of the recruitment effort. So I hope that answered the question. And I will say, in preparation, just this week, I was on a local Facebook group. I can't remember if it was our Skowhegan Neighborhood Watch or, our Skowhegan Community Matters, but there was a young woman there trying to find out information about, training to be a CNA. And then that, sort of created a dialogue where when I watched that thread, it was, things like this that would help, this type of outreach. And I was unfamiliar of the effort already underway by DHHS, but I think that I see in my social media feed, the state trying to recruit through those avenues. And I think it makes sense for the state of Maine to look at making investments into, specific fields for job recruitment. So you did hear earlier where Jess Maurer spoke of folks in rural Maine. We experienced one of our units closing within the last couple of years, the Home Care for Maine. And those folks were, for lack of a better term, some of them were like per diem workers, and it was based on the number of clients they had. And, there was some folks that were traveling through Representative Drinkwater's district, traveling through your district. And we're just having those instances where they would show up and a client may be unavailable at that time, or, things like mileage reimbursement were just crippling for these folks. And they believed in doing good work, but the clients were spread out all over the place. So they were spending most of their day driving to work with one or two clients, and it just wasn't a sustainable model. So, there's pieces like that, but this is a statewide issue, which is another piece too. In the recruitment, the retention, all of those things are a statewide issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for Mr. McCabe? I had a quick one, Jeff. I might have missed it earlier in your testimony. Does MSCA still represent any portion of this workforce?
We have some folks that are working with adults with disabilities, sort of a different setting. But you did hear some of the conversation today was, it sort of spanned a whole bunch of the workforce, which, that's the other piece. I've often felt these reimbursement rates are so, specific, and I've never been, fully able to understand all of those, reasons for those reimbursement rates. And I think some of it's the federal government. I know there's some organizations that have, tried to have a home care model, also, a skilled nursing model. There's probably some of these organizations that are doing that in that type of blend. I know Home Care for Maine was trying to do that, and it just was not an effective model. So, yeah. And I will say there's great deal of interest in sort of across the country, as you're well aware, Chair Sylvester, for organizing this workforce and raising these folks up.
Perfect, thank you. Unmuting myself, I muted myself. So thank you, Mr. McCabe, for your testimony. And I am, if I looked over to the right, I would see that Ms. Crane Turton is going to speak on behalf of Mr. Goodwin. Welcome to the committee. Ms. Crane Turton.
Thank you very much. I've attempted to start my video, but I'm unsuccessful.
Okay, I sent you an invite in case you can. But if
Got it.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Lori Crane Turton. I'm the Senior Director of Adult Services at the John F. Murphy Homes in Auburn, Maine, where I've been employed for 34 years. Today, I'm here just to offer you the testimony for Todd Goodwin, the CEO of John F. Murphy Homes, in support of LD 886, resolved to encourage employment in the direct care workforce. John F. Murphy Homes is a nonprofit provider of services to kids and adults with disabilities. We're also a member of the workforce, Todd is also a member of the Workforce and Legislative Committee of the Maine Association of Community Service Providers, known as MACSP, the statewide association of over 70 organizations supporting thousands of kids, adolescents, and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities throughout our state. I'd like to thank Representative Fay and her co-sponsors for putting this bill forward. In the face of long-standing, grievous, and statewide workforce challenges, this bill is a welcome call for teamwork that is desperately needed. The disability sector contains a variety of direct care titles, as you've heard today, a key component of which is the DSP, the Direct Support Professionals. DSPs, as the linchpin of the disability sector in Maine, are disproportionately represented by women and new Mainers. As one of Androscoggin County's largest employers, my agency employs roughly 750 direct care worker types, 400 of which are DSPs. Statewide, agencies like ours employ on the order of 10,000 DSPs. Our sector is indeed an economic driver in the communities we serve. As I speak to you today, my agency has the highest number of vacant DSP positions we have ever had. Our vacancies represent over 3,000 open hours per week of support. Per a recent survey of MACSP members, we have lost over 16% of our workforce since the beginning of the pandemic. And as of February of this year, that's more than 1,600 DSPs. Most agencies employing direct care workers rely on outdated and underfunded main care rate models that have not kept pace with the state's minimum wage law. While we all work feverishly to overcome the endemic barriers to recruiting and retaining necessary staff, we need your support in not just understanding this essential workforce requirement to support our citizens with disability, but we also need action to include this essential workforce in any of our state plans focused on building stronger communities and local economies. A coordinated multimedia public service campaign that promotes direct care worker jobs as a career choice would be an excellent place to start. Thank you for your consideration. I would like to say that I will attempt to answer any questions on behalf of Mr. Goodwin, but if I cannot, I would offer that he could respond in writing as a follow-up. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for that kind offer, Ms. Crane Turton. Are there any questions from the committee? I just have a quick one. I was very interested in the sort of movable, transportable credential. Is that something in your setting that you think would be advantageous?
Could you please?
They were talking about having one credential where if a home service person couldn't work today at their client, they might be able to come and work in a setting such as Fisher.
Absolutely. At John F. Murphy Homes, we have approximately 34 residential sites. One of those sites is classified as a nursing home. We cannot flow our DSPs into the nursing home and vice versa to pick up those hours. So yes, that would be a tremendous help for our organization.
And that just led me to another quick question. In terms of scope of care, what does that need to be looked at as well? Just in terms of being able to make sure that people have training, so that if the position that's open, if they're only able to do 3 of the 8 things that are required, that they might be able to move up that ladder.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Are there any other questions for Ms. Crane-Turton? Seeing none, thank you for being here today, and we appreciate all your testimony on behalf of Mr. Goodwin. Alyssa, do we have any other folks waiting to testify?
No, that's it.
Very good. Then I will close the hearing on LD 886 and open the hearing on LD 1338, an act to protect employees' exercise of workplace rights. And I see the sponsor, Representative Millette, is here with us.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. You have the floor, Representative.
Thank you. I am working off of my iPad, so just 1 minute. So can you still see me? Is my video still on?
Your video went off.
That's what I was afraid of. So there's this very strange thing that happens when you try to read testimony on your same device, well, when you have an iPad. So I'm sorry, bear with me, please.
If you need to turn off your camera to read, that's fine. Whatever works best for you.
Okay, if I can't find it quickly. All right, here we go. So good morning, Representative Sylvester and esteemed members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Rebecca Millette and I represent House District 30, which is most of Cape Elizabeth. I am presenting for your consideration LD 1338, an act to protect employees' exercise of workplace rights. When I introduced in the 129th legislature the earned paid sick time bill that later became the first earned paid time off policy in the nation, this committee received testimony from working Mainers about the untenable choices they faced between earning a paycheck or staying home to tend to a family member or themselves when ill. Also, in a number of testimonies, we heard about their own experiences or the experiences of their coworkers of having hours cut after having taken an unpaid day due to illness or worse, being fired. Quote, there is nothing more heartbreaking than staying home from work at the doctor's orders, only to return to work to find that I didn't have a job anymore, unquote. Quote, there's also a lot of fear around if I'm being taken seriously when I am sick or when my kids are sick. It definitely hurts when you have to take off 2 or more days in a row. You have that few of great, even I fear of great, even am I even going to have a job? Quote, I once saw one of my coworkers throw up while working, wash their hands and continue to work. They needed to stay at the job and couldn't afford to go home because their paychecks would be cut or they feared they lose hours on the schedule. While retaliation protections were included in the original bill, the language was not included in the enacted legislation as assurances were made that measures would be put in place through rulemaking. That unfortunately did not happen, and that is why I'm before you today. This bill, as amended, would make sure that an employer would be prohibited from any form of discrimination or retaliation against an employee who exercises their rights under Maine's employment laws. Currently, Maine law protects an individual who reports his or her employer for refusing to provide such rights as paid leave. But there is no protection if the employer provides the right, but then reduces the employee's hours or fires the individual. The bill would cover all employee rights in Title 26, Chapter 7, and these include taking 30 minutes rest break for every 6 hours of consecutive work, taking accommodations for nursing mothers, disclosing wages to coworkers or asking coworkers how much they earn, taking or asking for earned paid leave, taking or requesting leave of absence as a legislator, using Maine's unpaid family medical leave law, taking or requesting leave as a victim of domestic violence, taking or requesting leave during a public health emergency. Enforcement of the prohibition on retaliation and harassment of employees is taken from existing language under Family Medical Leave Statute, which is repealed in that section of law and moved to this bill's new subsection. Maine has a workforce issue, and one way to address this is by putting in place policies that safeguard workers financially and physically and create a greater sense of security. Our employees need to know that we value their hard work and stand by the rights we have created in law. I ask you to support LD 1338 and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Representative Millette. Are there any questions for the good representative? Representative Millett, if you were going to, having taken this journey to try to protect these rights over the last couple of sessions, if you were going to say the key right of this bill for folks listening at home is this.
Oh, I think that nearly all Maine workers really work hard, take their job seriously, and sometimes they get sick or bad things happen or they become a parent. And there's this fear that somehow they could lose their job because of something unexpected happening. And I think they deserve better than that. So I think it's just about giving them greater sense of security.
Thank you very much, Representative. Are there any other questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, thank you for being here today, Representative, and for bringing this bill forward.
Thank you. And a shout out to Representative Pebworth for a great bill. So glad we got unanimous in education. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Representative. All right, so we are going to hear from Adam Good, and then Andrew Mason, and then Gina Morin. Mr. Good, you have the floor.
Good morning, Representative Sylvester and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Adam Good. I'm the Legislative and Political Director of the Maine AFL-CIO. We represent 40,000 working people in the state of Maine. We work to improve the lives and working conditions of our members and of all working people. The legislation before you prohibits an employer from discriminating or retaliating against a worker who exercises their rights under Maine's employment laws. The workplace has a fundamental power imbalance, with employers controlling many aspects of a worker's life. One such avenue of control is to blatantly or subtly punish workers who exercise workplace rights. Retaliation and fear of being retaliated against happens to working people in a range of industries. As recently as 2019, it was found that 30% of Maine workers in the private sector did not use paid leave because they feared employer retaliation or their employer made it too difficult to use that paid leave. Retaliation is rampant in low-wage work amongst immigrant workers and is often found in work done by women. Working people have some protections against employer retaliation when a worker reports a violation of a law through Maine's existing whistleblower laws. That law does not provide protection from retaliation when a worker exercises a positive right. So this means if a worker reports their employer for violating a law that already exists, like wage theft, and the employer retaliates against the worker with a demotion, reducing their hours, or reporting their family members to immigration authorities, that employer would face additional penalties. LD 1338 improves retaliation laws by providing workers with protections for scenarios when they are retaliated against for exercising a right. The example in this scenario would be an employer granting a worker's request to take earned paid time off, but then reducing the worker's hours in order to punish the worker for exercising their rights. We have many great worker protection laws on the books. These include rights like having a 30-minute break for every 6 hours of work, rights to disclose wages to coworkers, to request leave as a victim of domestic violence, or taking accommodation as a nursing mother. These worker protection laws fall short of meeting their objectives if they do not guarantee strong protection from retaliation. We cannot expect workers to demand these basic rights at work if that means risking getting stuck with a bad shift or losing hours, leading to lost pay, and all of the stress associated with missed payments, lower credit scores, eviction, or loss of transportation. LB 1338 would help working people avoid retaliation in the workplace. We urge you to support this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Good. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Good? Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Good, for being here. So long and short of it, this particular bill doesn't create any more rights. What it does, it calls for stricter enforcement and higher penalties. Would that be a fair assertion?
Yeah, right now, if your boss doesn't pay you your wages or does something wrong, there's a whistleblower protection for that. But in a scenario where if you were in a workplace and your boss said you can't have your 30-minute break every 6 hours, or you can't have your mandated lunch break, and you said, I'm going to take it anyways, and you took that break, and they said, well, if you do that, we're going to give you a worse shift, then there's no protection in that regard. So I think the fear of being retaliated against is real, and we think it only makes sense to have some level of parity where the same way we treat reporting a violation is protected, and then this should be protected as well.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Of course, Representative.
Thank you. So in order to get to the whether or not a violation has occurred, there would be some type of hearing at the Department of Labor. Is that how this would work?
I suspect so. I think that it's a good question. Hopefully there's some type of legal person that can answer that later on. But I suspect there's a body of law related to how to prove that this happened and get at the actual exercising of penalties and what happens when you actually determine that this actually happened.
Very good. Thank you.
I believe we have at least one attorney coming up in the queue, Representative, as well as Mr. Rowland, who is also going to testify at the end. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Good.
Enjoy your day.
Next, we have Andrew Mason, followed by Gina Morin, and Ms. Morin is going to be followed by James Mile. Welcome, Mr. Mason.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Sylvester and other members of the Labor and Housing Committee. My name is Andrew Mason, and I'm here on behalf of the Maine Education Association to testify in strong support of LD 1338. Excuse me. MEA is a strong supporter of the family leave and earned paid leave provisions in Maine law. As an organization, we try to bargain in strong protections that protect an individual's right to access and utilize family leave and earned paid leave without being penalized by the employer. This bill continues and strengthens the family leave enforcement provisions and wisely applies the same enforcement provisions to other provisions, including the earned paid leave law. Making the enforcement provisions consistent and strong increases the likelihood that employers will feel obligated to comply with the law. Even today, I continue to hear stories about employees being pressured or coerced to limit or forego utilizing family leave in order to not burden the employer. Further, these updates make clear the Department of Labor's responsibilities in enforcing the statute, as well as putting employers on notice that they also risk civil enforcement through the courts, with the prospect that it will be responsible for paying the employees attorney fees when they are needlessly forced to go to court. Lastly, this pandemic has shined a light on many inadequate protections that employees have concerning their health and safety, as well as childcare options. Employers should realize that it is in their long-term interest to have healthy employees who sometimes need flexibility in order to care for themselves or their family. Removing this stress results in a more productive and satisfied workforce. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Mason, for being here. So this right of private action and the repayment or reimbursement of attorney's fees, that's not in current law, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this will be adding that. What else would it add to? I think extra penalties as well, I believe.
Yes, I believe so. And I think I heard that Mr. Rowland is going to be testifying later. And I've had frequent conversations with him concerning the Earned Paid Leave Act. And one of the issues that we have, and it's not just with the earned paid leave, but it's with many of these provisions, that it's actually unclear who's responsible for enforcing the right. So we have, on many occasions, had the employer attorneys or the employer assert that we can't enforce the right. So we can't file a grievance to enforce some of these rights because that's solely within the purview of the Department of Labor. And that's generally not the case, but it's just not clear. So it gives room to other interpretations. But when we go to the Department of Labor, they go, yeah, there's nothing that stops you from also enforcing it through the contract. And the reason I focused on in the testimony, the earned paid leave and the family leave portions, those are typically the ones that would get litigated because there's potential money damages. Some of the other rights that are being enforced against the anti-retaliation, there's not a lot of money damages that are absolutely clear. So it would be difficult to enforce. So it's easy for an employer to put leverage on employees because they know they're not going to be responsible if their feet are held to the fire. By adding some sort of enforcement provision and allowing the reimbursement of reasonable attorney fees means that an employee who has a right to, as Mr. Good said earlier, the 30-minute break, and the employer is pushing them to not take that break. Well, it's hard to put a damage number on that. And it may be so low that, well, no attorney is going to take it just on a contingency fee. But when you put that in with the right to recoup reasonable attorney fees as a penalty against the employer knows that now they may have their feet held to the fire and be responsible for it. So it's a balancing of the scales, so to speak.
Thank you. Follow, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So if a mechanism were set up whereby the Department of Labor could satisfactorily resolve these issues, you think there would be probably a lesser need for the right of private action?
It depends on, again, what the enforcement is. The difficulty is the Department of Labor generally is going to be overwhelmed. I know they've been overwhelmed with enforcement of the earned paid leave and interpreting it. So it's often easier and quicker for an employee to express their right on their own individually or through the contract. And if making it clear that the employees who are fortunate to have collective bargaining agreements that they work under and have those rights enforced, it's easier for us to file a grievance on some of these rights and utilize those enforcements than it is to wait on the Department of Labor to enforce a right.
Thank you. Representative Drinkwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mason, nice to hear from the MEA on this subject. Maybe I'm making the wrong assumption here because I'm hearing the MEA, which represents probably all the schools in the state of Maine, saying that there's a problem with the law. Are you witnessing any problems with the schools that you represent?
Well, that's what I was saying, was that some of the law firms that represent the districts take positions such as we can't enforce the Earned Paid Leave Act through the contract, which is what typically is done, because they say, oh no, the Department of Labor is the only one that can do that. And the Department of Labor is telling us, no, that's not necessarily true. You still have these other rights. So depending on the provision at issue, it's not unusual to have an employer or the employer's counsel suggest that they don't want to go through the grievance process, the contractual process. They want to take it out and force the employee to go to the Department of Labor or do something different. We're suggesting that everybody should have the same rights to enforce the statute.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Representative Geer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is going to follow on with that line of thinking, because the thing I'm wondering about is how the sort of the tension between the contract and the law, I guess, and how much of the guidance from the districts or from the employer is explicit versus implicit. Are employees saying they are feeling unable to exercise their right because of implicit bias against using family leave, or is it something that they're being told explicitly?
I'm going to throw the legal answer of it depends, because the new family leave law, we're fortunate that we've bargained stronger protections in many instances. So for our members, it would be the implicit pressure. And especially because in the school system, there's a lot of pressure to not take time off because there's a limited number of actual school days. So the pressure is wait until summer. You know, it's not unusual that districts or that teachers find a way to give birth in the summertime. They try to plan their pregnancies so that it's not in the middle of the school year, because it becomes a problem, an implicit problem. It's rare that a principal would say, listen, if you're going to have a baby in September and need to take 12 weeks off, you might not have a job when you come back. But they certainly don't make it easy. And there's plenty of female teachers that we hear from that's just the unspoken rule, that if you're a young female teacher, you better try to plan your pregnancy for the summertime to avoid that conversation.
Okay, just a quick follow on.
Yes,
if
please.
I may. And well, I guess I would say, just as I give great credit to all of those families who are able to so well plan their pregnancies, but kudos to them. And isn't that implicit understanding a violation? I guess I would just say, putting it out there, isn't that a violation of the law, since the law says you are entitled to take this leave when needed?
I would love to have you be the judge in a case that I bring that suggests that. Yes, I would certainly say it, but the law becomes a little more technical. To be able to prove what actions were taken directly due to implicit, it's kind of like trying to not muck things up, but trying to prove where you got COVID. You know, we've got ideas, we've got strong inferences. The perception of, did you feel pressured to not take a right that you're expressly allowed to? Well, you know, there may be home pressures, there may be family pressures that also weigh in on top of the job pressures, but primarily what we feel is the pressure from the employer to be on premise, be available. We're paying you to be here, so you better be here. And it's difficult to find a sub. It's difficult to find an ed tech or the coverage. You know, the teachers, there's a workforce issue that I'm sure you've heard, and I know that the education committee has heard over and over, that impacts it. And it does, it puts stress on the employer. There's no doubt about it in many instances. Hello, Senator Hickman. So it is something to balance, but the needs of the employee should have, they should be able to enforce their rights. That's what I noted in my testimony. Happy, healthy employees perform better and will be retained longer than ones that think that they're being pressured to do something that they don't feel they can do.
Thank you. Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for coming on again, but I have another question. I think you mentioned, Mr. Mason, that there have been some complaints about the enforcement of the paid time off law with the department. I suppose the department can answer that, but I'm also going to ask you, that law has been in effect only for about 100 days, so nobody's able to even qualify for it yet. So how could there then be complaints about a law that hasn't really kicked in yet?
Because we're negotiating it into the contracts to conform. The contracts that we have sometimes with the right to 40 days of unfettered leave, they may not have that in the contract. So we're negotiating. Sometimes it's recalculating or recharacterizing sick leave so that it meets the qualifications. So we're knee deep into negotiating this so that the law conforms into the contracts. And Director Rowland will be the first to say, there is no enforcement yet because we need it to roll out. And then when an employer allegedly violates something, an enforcement will be brought. We're trying to avoid that in the first instance by complying with what we think the clear terms of the law are in redoing the CBA language when we're negotiating that with MOUs or new contracts. So we're trying to avoid that to start with, and we're getting pushback from the schools in terms of how they believe it should be enforced and who should be in charge of looking at violations.
Thank you. Chair Hickman, welcome.
I am still preoccupied in the other computer in my cockpit today, but I just had to come in and say to the good Representative Mason, who I served with in my first term, hello. And isn't it lovely to be here is my question.
It is, and I wish we could be here in person and I could be bringing in the candy that I'm supposed to bring to the Labor Committee. So I apologize, and I look forward to seeing everybody in person at some point. And I know that I have to step up my in-person game with the dapper Representative Cuddy and the always good-looking Senator Hickman. So it will be fun to be back to see all of you again.
Well, it is good to see you as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me that indulgence.
Is there a follow-up to that, Mr. Chair?
None whatsoever.
All right, perfect. Thank you. I have a couple of questions, Mr. Mason. I will take quick answers. So have you moved any of these cases forward through the grievance procedures of districts that are saying that the grievance procedure doesn't apply? Have you yet filed any grievances on behalf of that?
Not concerning the earned pay, because we're still negotiating the language in the contracts.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then I'm in highlighting the difference between the grievance procedure and and private right of action. It occurred to me that the great thing about the grievance procedure is you can move a case individually on behalf of one person. You can move it as a class on behalf of an entire school district. And do you really feel that attorneys will take individual cases, or would they really only move on class action cases where sort of the big money is?
With the right to attorney fees, an attorney is able to do it. And just as a point of information, I'm not sure that everybody understands the use of attorney fees. Generally, attorney fees, an attorney doesn't get whatever they want when they submit that. They submit a bill to the court, and the judge evaluates the work, the expertise of the attorney, the time, value, and frequently those bills are adjusted. So it's not an unfettered jackpot that attorneys are going to be getting out of this, but it's enough, because many of these violations can be rectified early on when an attorney gets involved. And that's not even unusual in our cases. When you have a principal and the local leader arguing or negotiating over something, and it's getting contentious, if I can get involved and the district's attorney can get involved, and cooler heads sit back going, okay, yes, this is what the law says. If we go forward, this is going to be the consequence. Why don't we do this? And it will stop it from needlessly getting into the court system, because you've got people who are paid to resolve problems.
Right. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the spelling out the attorney fees. Are there any other questions for Mr. Mason? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Yeah, it's good to see everybody. Happy Friday.
Next, we will have Gina Moran, who has been waiting very patiently in the queue. And then we'll have James Mile, and then Jeff McCabe, and then Roxanne Kai Petrovich, and then we will be moving to folks who are opposed to the bill. Welcome, Ms. Moore.
Good morning. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and honorable members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in favor of LD 1338. My name is Gina Morin. I live in Auburn. I am a volunteer lobby team leader for Maine People's Alliance. The 32,000 members of MPA stretch from Kittery to Fort Kent, and we are committed to creating a state of Maine where everyone has what they need, everyone contributes what they can, and no one is left behind. When I worked as a corrections officer, we worked 12-hour shifts. By law, we were supposed to get 2 30-minute breaks, but the supervisors often only allowed us to take 2 15-minute breaks in a 12-hour shift. We had to eat lunch while we worked. We eventually said something to our supervisor, but nothing changed. We didn't push it any further because we instinctively knew, as so many workers do, not to rock the boat. We were right to be afraid. While Maine's existing whistleblower laws protect employees against retaliation for reporting a violation of law or departmental rule, there is no law to protect against retaliation for exercising a positive right. That means that if we had reported our supervisor for not giving us our legally mandated breaks, they could have legally punished us by moving our shifts, reducing our hours, or even firing us. That sounds wrong, but it happens every day. Workplace rights are meaningless if employees are afraid to use them. Fear or retaliation can be a big factor in workers choosing not to take time off or exercise other rights they might be entitled to. Women, Mainers of color, and low-wage workers are especially vulnerable to fears of retaliation. In 2019 survey of private sector workers, MESEP found that around 30% of Maine workers with paid leave didn't make use of it, either because they feared employer retaliation or because their employer made it too difficult to use. That's why LD 1338 is so crucial. Retaliation or discriminatory acts prohibited under LD 1338 would be enforceable through judicial action. An employee could file a civil action which could result in injunction, fines, or an award of damages to the worker. That would be a major disincentive to employees who are violating our hard-fought labor rights. LD 1338.
Ms. Morin, unfortunately, we're at the end of your 3 minutes. I wonder if you could summarize your thoughts. If you're in support for the bill and
Sure. LD 1338 is about making Maine a state that has labor rights in practice, not on paper, not just on paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Are there any questions from the committee for Ms. Moore? I have a quick one for you. I know I have a lot of teachers on my social media, and I know when break came, you know, they weren't talking about going to Cancun or whatever. They were talking about the ability to be able to go to the bathroom whenever they wanted, right? Which is one of the things that I hear from corrections officers as well. You know, the ability to just sort of leave your post and to do those sorts of things. And, you know, so is this leave important to be able to schedule things like doctor's appointments and being able to take your kid to, you know, see, you know, physicians, those sorts of things?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much for being here today, Ms. Moore. We appreciate you coming out. and waiting so patiently. Next, we have James Mile, followed by Jeff McCabe, followed by Roxanne Kai Petrovich.
Hello, good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the committee. My name is James Mile. I'm a policy analyst at the Maine Center for Economic Policy, and I'm testifying before you today in support of LD 1338. LD 1338 is important to ensure that the labor laws that you and your colleagues have enacted amount to more than just empty promises. This bill expands existing anti-retaliation language in the state's unpaid family medical leave law to provide employees with recourse when employers retaliate against them for exercising other basic worker rights. You've heard a lot about how the law works, so I'll skip over some parts of my testimony, but I will note some other points in my written testimony that may be of use to you. We've heard that employer retaliation can take many forms, and there can be less obvious versions of retaliation, these implicit pressures and punishments after the fact. But there are some employers who engage even in explicit demerit systems, who give workers a black mark or a demerit every time they use leave, which can mean that an employer can ultimately risk being laid off as a result of using paid time off. A national survey, for example, in 2018 found that 1 in 3 private sector workers in the country worked for a business with some kind of demerit system for absences. You've heard about the MECET worker survey that found that about 1/3 of Mainers who had paid time off don't use it as much as they could because of retaliation or because it's hard to use. And workers and advocates all raised these concerns when this committee heard the bill in 2019 to establish the paid time off law. If you look at the public comments that were received by the Department of Labor last year when they were in rulemaking, about 125 of the 160 comments, a large majority of them included requests to include an anti-retaliation provision. However, the Attorney General's office had informed the Department of Labor that they didn't have that authority because it wasn't in the statute that was passed by the legislature. So LD 1338 is an attempt to fix that oversight, but also to apply one consistent standard to multiple rights in Maine's labor laws as well. It would also have the advantage of protecting any future rights that this legislature would pass. I know, for example, that you're considering a bill to allow employees to request schedule changes, and there may be other bills in this session that would be positively impacted by passage of LD 1338. I'm happy to take any questions, and in general, I would just urge you to support the legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Mile. Representative Pebworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mile. Can you tell me a little bit more about the piece with the Attorney General that you mentioned?
Yeah, so and the Department of Labor may be able to speak more generally to this. My understanding is that there was an assumption when the Earned Paid Time Off law was passed in 2019 that retaliation was something that could be addressed in rulemaking. The bill that was passed left a lot of things up to the department for rulemaking, but the Attorney General's office had a decision saying that they limited what could be addressed in rulemaking to things that were expressed in statute kind of explicitly. And because there was no charge in the statute saying they should address retaliation, that was sort of beyond the scope of the rulemaking. So that's my understanding on it. And the Department of Labor can probably answer that in a little more detail for you.
Great, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Mile? Mr. Mile, I wonder if you could just speak very briefly about the survey that MECEP did and just sort of what the scope of that was.
Yeah, sure. This is a survey that we conducted in September 2019. We had a polling company that does a lot of these different surveys conduct it for us, and they interviewed I think around 450 private sector workers and asked them a series of different questions. So it was conducted like any other scientific poll or survey. And it found that 30% of folks who said they had paid time off also said they didn't use it as much as they wanted because of fear of retaliation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Any other questions for Mr. Mile? Seeing none, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jeff McCabe, followed by Roxanne Kai Petrovich, and then we're going to have Bruce Garrity, Dana Doran, and Deborah Hart.
Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. I am still Jeff McCabe, the Director of Politics and Legislation for Maine Service Employees Association. In an interest of the committee's time, I will not be redundant and repeat things that the other speakers have said. I just wanted to enter into the record. This legislation is important because in many situations, workers experience the fear of retaliation if they exercise their employee rights. Workers who have accrued earned time off, for example, may choose not to utilize that earned time off of fear of burdening their employer or facing retaliation if they do so. No employee should have to make decisions about whether they can exercise their rights under Maine law simply because there's not adequate protections against retaliation from employees if they do so. Now, more than ever, we are seeing the importance of protecting workers and supporting the heroes who have gotten us through this pandemic. We have seen the importance of workers not only earning paid leave, but being able to utilize it if necessary without the fear of losing their jobs. This legislation would take an important step towards ensuring that employees are able to safely and freely exercise their rights under Maine employment laws. I'm happy to take any questions, and I did want to just hit on one point that Representative Geer brought up earlier. In regards to teachers, planning for birth of children. And I did just want to say that there are folks in the lobbying, in political and labor arena that also plan the birth of their children after the legislative session is due to be over. So I just wanted to flag that from a personal experience for you, just to make you aware.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. And at least we let you go to the bathroom whenever you like. So that is one good thing. Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. McCabe. A lot of other bills we've had regarding employee-employer relationships, we've heard from employers that they're bending over backwards now to accommodate their employees as much as they can because of the great need for the employees. There's just a work shortage out there. So can you kind of reconcile, we evidently a lot of complaints there. There must be in the waiting room somewhere, there must be a lot of complaints, and yet we hear the employers are bending over backwards. Could you reconcile that for us?
Bending over backwards, it seems like I would agree there definitely is a shortage of folks to fill positions, across the units that we represent. Huge recruitment and retention issues. And, that burden is definitely placed on the employees. We continue to see folks that we represent unable to use their paid time off and just feel that burden because there's nobody there to pick up the slack. So, in that aspect, I would definitely agree. We've seen specifically even in the executive branch, the need to, raise caps on the amount of leave time that people can carry because there's just not that ability to use that time. And there is that fear of retaliation or what that might mean. And then I think that you're hearing from folks, we're hearing from folks with the access to representational services. And I think outside of that, you have these essential workers across the state of Maine who have stepped up in big ways. And, their fear of retaliation, we've seen this in certain sectors, within restaurants and others where, folks are dropped off the schedule if they decide to take a leave time to quarantine or things of that nature, or to encourage their coworkers to quarantine. So, there's some great employers out there, but there's also folks that are not so great. And we really need to think about protecting workers. And we think this bill does that. So.
Thank you. Quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. I think you muted, so I'll
go ahead, Representative.
Okay, thank you. I've heard a couple of times now about people complaining about not having the paid time off respected. Is this contractual paid time off? Because the legislatively required paid time off is, basically not even in effect yet because nobody has the time accumulated to have earned that. So, and if it is contractual time off, is there not already portions within their contracts to remedy that?
Yeah, thank you. I think for the situations where there is collective bargaining agreements in place, those agreements are in the process of being developed with, sort of meeting the guidelines of the new paid time off. And it's going to vary from contract to contract. So I know that you heard from Mr. Mason in that situation, and I can reach out to our attorney who does much of our contract law and does that negotiations, just so you can have some examples of some of the hurdles. And I think for us, it's going to be different, as far as negotiating with the executive branch. That's sort of one example. But when we get into negotiating with municipalities and counties or private employers, it's going to be varying. So I think that's sort of contract specific, and also it's trying to sort of include the the new law as you have mentioned, and just how many days that's been in place. So I'm not familiar with any contracts that have been finalized with the parameters of that new law, but I know that we have met with Department of Labor a number of times. And when I say we, it's bargaining agents, public sector as well as private sector, just to try to figure out what that means. And I think there's a big question for the school districts too. And it seems like there's some misinformation out there that the department has had to clarify on that. So.
Thank you. Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And nice to see you, Mr. McCabe. I've been fortunate in my career to work for a number of companies where I had colleagues around the world working in different offices that we had. And one of the things that always struck me was that events like these in people's lives were not seen as a situation that required anyone to bend over backwards or any other way, but they were really just a matter of life as a human being, and things that the company needed to take account of, and therefore provide leave as the laws required in that country. I'm curious, from your perspective and your union's perspective, what you think needs to happen to change that characterization that we often hear in Maine and in the United States generally to employment needing to take account of human life.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for recognizing sort of the models that exist in other countries. The other day, I had an opportunity to talk with another parent while waiting for a tennis match. And this is a gentleman that works in the forest products industry and, is a Canadian citizen, who lives down the street from us and has been here for, I'm well aware of probably at least 10 years and is raising his children here. And he was talking to me about sort of the leave time that I anticipated taking after the birth of our child. And, it was interesting because with my first two children, leave wasn't necessarily something that was an option to me. I feel fortunate to be able to use the time that I've accrued. But it was a great example of where he described in the where he's from in Canada, it's expected that folks will take 2 years of leave. And at that time, it was shared between the parents and we spent a great deal of, sort of that acceptance. And, there's no question in other countries that, it's not an issue of picking up the slack. It's just what people do. Here it's like we place these burdens on the individual employee to like it's somehow their responsibility to make sure that their job is being done when, something comes up, and things come up. And it's, I feel fortunate where I work and through this pandemic, there's been challenges. I work with folks who are trying to provide childcare for their children. I feel fortunate, my children are older and, if you're ever on a Zoom with me, frequently my 12-year-old will interrupt, usually to ask for some sort of food that if I wasn't on a Zoom, I probably would say, no, you can't eat that. But in my workplace, like that's accepted. But, for so many other people here in Maine, that's not the case. And I think that, the questions that have come up, it's clear that we just need to, address some small changes so that DOL can protect workers. And I think there is a definite need for sort of a change in that shift in mindset. And it's troubling to me when we look at situations of folks who feel they can't use vacation time or can't use sick time, and their job is just that burden. And it's been made well aware during this pandemic, even for folks who have a collective bargaining agreement and have protections. They just feel that burden. So I think there is a need for a societal change, and so. So thank you for that.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here today, Jeff. Next, we have Roxanne Kai Petrovich. And then Alyssa, if you could let in Bruce Garrity, Dana Doran, and Deborah Hart.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Labor and Housing Committee. I am Roxanne Kai Petrovich. I am a resident of Woodstock and a member of Maine People's Alliance, and I'm here today to testify in support of LD 1338. A couple of years ago, I was a single mom working part-time for a fast food chain. My daughter was around 6 at the time. She has an anxiety disorder and is autistic, and my world revolves around her. This job allowed me to set my schedule and work around getting her on and off the bus for school and then being home for her in time to get her off the bus. If she got sick and I had to stay home and she had to stay home from school, I would have to call out to take care of her. I typically experienced retaliation through reduced hours the following weeks. Many times I would ask my mother, who worked night shifts as an RN, to stay up during the day and watch my daughter while I was at work, because calling out to care for her or even getting sick myself was not an option if I was to lose hours. I have an autoimmune disorder, a herniated disc in my spine and neck, and a neuromuscular disorder, as well as other health challenges. There were many days I went to work extremely sick or in severe pain. And if I needed to take a break or sit down, or even if I asked to go home early, despite it being a super slow day at work, I experienced being yelled at or having my hours cut the next week. I had to constantly fight to keep my hours above 20 per week, and I needed to work between 25 and 30 to keep up with my family's living costs. On weeks when I struggled with pain or sickness, the following weeks, my hours were cut drastically to between 15 and 18 hours. And I would be patronizingly told, well, we weren't sure if you could actually handle your hours this week. So despite my personal challenges between health problems and being a single mom at the time, my fear of retaliation and need for hours was greater. While I'm not working right now and I am instead focusing on mine and my daughter's health during this pandemic, I personally know many people in my community that are being affected by similar treatment to what I experienced. We need a law that protects workers that are in similar positions. Workplace rights have little to no meaning if employees are still fearful to use them due to retaliation from employers. Please support LD 1338. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kai Petrovich. Representative Rader.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Kai Petrovich. As someone who was told at a job, or who was asked at a job, are you sure you're going to be able to do this job now that you're a mom? I very much sympathize with you. In your experience of hearing about the anecdotes of fellow workers who have faced retaliation, do you have a sense of how many were sort of pulled aside and had no other witnesses or had no recourse? Because I know that frequently happens in these situations where employees are denied their rights, is that it happens out of view of anyone else. Was that your experience? And are you aware of that happening with other folks?
So there is, I'm not sure exactly how to answer this appropriately. I have family members and other co-workers at that time that were also experiencing retaliation. Personally, for me, when I tried to say something about it, my employer had forced arbitration, which I did a testimony about that about 2 years ago too. And it ended up being a, well, he said, she said situation, and there was no way to prove or go about rectifying or solving the issue that was being presented, with hours being cut and retaliation when I would have to either call out or take a break.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Kai Petrovich? Seeing none, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
We shall move to testimony. I will check first. Alyssa, there's nobody else in favor?
That is correct.
Thank you. We will move to testimony opposed to LD 1338. And our first up is Bruce Garrity. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the committee. My name is Bruce Garrity. I'm here today on behalf of the Maine Automobile Dealers Association. That is those are the dealers who are franchised new car dealers around the state. There are 110 or so franchisees, and they employ some 6,000 people. We do respectfully oppose LD 1338. We believe that it proceeds from an assumption that we don't necessarily agree with, that the system is either broken or overwhelmed or incapable of addressing the issues that come before the department. We think that expanding the process to include the kind of litigation options that are laid out for all of Chapter 7 in this bill is problematic for several reasons. We believe it is grossly overbroad. Respectfully, we agree that it is going to clog the courts with litigation and actually slow down the resolution of many complaints that employees might bring for resolution. We also think that it is going to increase costs dramatically to the extent that you have litigation. You have a variety of increased costs that you simply do not have to deal with in the administrative context. And we believe it's going to put decision-making in the hands of juries who are not expert, are not informed in these areas, and certainly don't have the experience that we see from people who work in the Department of Labor. This issue isn't a new one. And after last year's legislation, we'd point out that the Department of Labor held hearings all over the state. I believe there were 10 or 12. I'm not sure the exact number, Representative, but they were held all over the state, and both employers and employees got to make points they thought were important for the department's consideration. After those hearings, the department did come up with rules, promulgated Rule 170, Chapter 10, dealing with paid leave. So in an administrative context, the issues that are before you have been addressed, have been thoughtfully reviewed by the department, and it has made its decisions. We're not sure that advancing litigation of this nature promotes good public policy. And the last point I'd make, Representative, is that one of the provisions in the bill calls for rulemaking. To the extent that this is being changed so dramatically to allow so broad a base of litigation, and that there have always been rules in place that handle administrative matters, we're not sure what the purpose of rulemaking would be in the context of this bill. And I appreciate the opportunity to have made these comments, and I'd be happy to try and answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity. Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Garrity, for being here. The bill calls for private rights of action, which is litigation. And that means that your members would be forced to hire attorneys to defend themselves. And I'd like to know if you have even a general idea of what it costs, what the entry level costs for an attorney, and if there's anything in the bill that should your client win, that he can receive reimbursement for his attorney costs.
Let me answer that in reverse, Representative, and thank you for the question. I'm not aware of a provision in the bill that would allow an employer to receive, pardon me, allow an employer to receive attorney's fees if successful. With respect to costs, frankly, I've had the opportunity over the decades to litigate a lot of cases. And I can tell you that you're talking well into 5 figures if you have a case go from soup to nuts in Superior Court. You're talking about discovery, you're talking about experts, you're talking about pretrial conferences, you're talking about the empanelment of a jury. There are a lot of steps and a lot of costs, and I think the expense would be very significant. And well, I think that responds to your question, Representative.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Garrity? Mr. Garrity, I'll just, I know you watch these bills as closely as the committee, and so it was my understanding when this passed that the DOL was going to be the enforcement mechanism. And so we know how understaffed they are. So would you support that being the enforcement mechanism if you don't like private right of action that was pulled out of the bill?
Well, thank you for the question, Representative. I guess I would say that right now, the Department of Labor is the enforcement mechanism. And while there may be concerns that the department is understaffed, and I think that's a concern that you could raise with many different hardworking agencies in this state, I would suggest that trying to use the court system as a way to alleviate that pressure not only will be unsuccessful, it will further press a court system that itself feels understaffed and undermanned, and it's going to delay the opportunity for justice to prevail. Whether that ends up being an employer or an employee prevailing in litigation, you're probably talking a couple of years, especially with the limitations COVID has brought on.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity, and hopefully you whisper a good word about the positions we put into the budget to try to alleviate. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dana Duran, followed by Deborah Hart, followed by Jeff Austin.
Great. Thank you, Representative Sylvester, Senator Hickman, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Dana Duran. I'm the Executive Director of the Professional Logging Contractors of Maine Trade Association that represents logging and truckers in the state. Thanks for providing me the opportunity to testify on behalf of our membership in opposition to LD 1338. We certainly respect Representative Millett and other co-sponsors' intent with the legislation, but the changes to Chapter 7 of Title 26, which are recommended in the bill, from our perspective, are not going to be beneficial to Maine small businesses. I've also provided written testimony, so you can refer to that, and I'll try to summarize just to make sure I stay within the 3-minute window. So let me first start by saying, we haven't seen any hard data or evidence other than anecdotal at this point with the shortcomings with Maine law that need to be corrected by this legislation. They're obviously in Chapter 7 of Title 26, there are already numerous workplace rights provisions that are there, and I'm going to get into that in a moment. All of our membership, as you know, and I know all of you on this committee understand what's happened to our industry, have been hammered by mill closures, mill reductions, COVID-19. Right now, we're experiencing major issues with potential price gouging in building construction markets, et cetera. So for us, this legislation is not going to help us get through that. It's not going to help our businesses hire new people, and it's certainly going to make them less averse to hiring new employees in the future if all of them are subject to potential litigation. You might ask why this is going to happen. This is, of course, meant to be a simple employee protection change in this bill. Unfortunately, what this bill does, it in fact repeals decades of chaptered law with respect to the detailed rights of employees, obligations of employers, remedies for employees, and the consequences for employers if they do not follow the law. Instead, it replaces these commonly known workplace protections and remedies with a basis for a claim, as you heard from Mr. Garrity, of unlawful discrimination, and it will authorize an employee's legal counsel to file a lawsuit in the Superior Court to obtain an injunction, damages for lost pay or benefits, liquidated damages of $100 a day for each day of violation, double damages if willful in payment of the attorney fees for employees' counsel. This amounts to a more litigious and confrontational environment between the employee and the employer, and really will do untold harm to the business environment in the state of Maine for the long run. The majority of our business and our family-based businesses, they pride themselves on being good, long-term, stable places of employment in rural Maine. They don't rule with a heavy hand. They take very good care of their employees. They respect their employees because they don't have access to a lot of employees. As I detailed in my testimony, Our industry, once it returns to full employment, needs about 2,000 people over the next 10 years. It is not in our best interest to act with that heavy hand, and we work very closely with the employers and the employees.
Mr. Duran,
So with
that is the end of your time. Yes, so if you could summarize.
Appreciate it. I was coming right to that. So no need to summarize any further. You've heard our opinion, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Duran. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Duran? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have Deborah Hart.
Good morning, Representative Sylvester and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Deborah Hart. I'm a resident of Manchester, Maine, and I'm speaking to you today on behalf of my client, the Retail Association of Maine. They have 400 members statewide, and they represent retailers of all sizes and employ nearly 90,000 people in the state of Maine. The Retail Association of Maine is speaking in opposition to LD 1338. The language in this bill is essentially identical to what was previously in the section of law on family medical leave requirements. It also included unlawful discrimination against exercise of right. This law was new in the late 1980s, and it was quite a departure to say an employee could take leave for a number of reasons, and an employer basically had to accommodate that leave under a number of scenarios. This law applied to all employment places, whether they had a large number of employees who could take up the slack when an employee needed time for family medical leave, or a small employer who often had to task someone else with double the workload or had to do the work themselves. Most all employers, and let me state that there are an overwhelming number of employers who care very deeply for their employees and want to do the right thing by them, still have to figure out how to get work done when an employee needs to take time off for any type of leave. Again, we do not believe employers unilaterally oppose employees taking needed time off for legitimate reasons, but this bill seems to be setting the stage for litigation when any employee feels that they deserve time off and for whatever reason they are denied that time off. During the recent pandemic, most all employers and many employees were faced with difficulties in handling employment, remote learning, and a number of other challenges. It was a time when employees worked with their employees on a monthly, weekly, and sometimes daily basis to get the work done while still dealing with extenuating circumstances. We did not hear a public outcry for the need for new laws to mandate how employers treat their employees. And employers are grateful that they could continue to do business and employ the people who work for them. For these reasons, we respectfully ask that you oppose this bill. I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide you with any needed information.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. Are there any questions from the committee for Ms. Hart? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jeff Austin, followed by Jessica LaLiberty, followed by Peter Gore.
Representative Sylvester, members of the committee, my name is Jeff Austin. I'm here on behalf of the Maine Hospital Association, and we're here in opposition to the bill. A couple of quick points. One is to just keep in mind that there are the two provisions in the bill, the anti-retaliatory provision and the private right of action. They are distinct. They don't have to go together. In fact, I believe in the OSHA statutes, you have an anti-retaliatory provision with Department of Labor enforcement and no private right of action. So I would suggest that you consider them as separate provisions because there's nothing that requires them to go together, and other parts of Maine law treat them differently. I'd like to pick up on something Mr. Doran said about the lack of data about retaliatory actions. I think the proponents provided you some good data about fears, but not about the number of actual retaliatory acts. And this committee's been very diligent about asking for data. You need it on this bill. This bill requires a fiscal note. When the Maine legislature creates a new criminal law or a new right of action, the judicial branch is obligated to create a fiscal note for their increased workload. And I couldn't tell from the testimony if we're looking at 5 cases a year or 500 cases a year. Again, because most of the data was presented on fears as opposed to actual retaliatory acts that could be, a claim could be filed on. You can't file a claim on the fear, I would suppose. But now let me deviate because I got a little confused when I was listening to the Mr. Mason from the teachers union, where he said young mothers are routinely afraid to take time off for family medical leave. I'm confused because the family medical leave statute in Maine, I believe, has an anti-retaliatory provision and has a private right of action. It seemed as if he was saying this statutory structure is doomed to fail as it's failing young mothers in the school systems. And if it's not working for them, and they have some of the most powerful and professional representation in the state, why would it work anywhere else? So it gave me pause. I don't think of the family medical leave laws failing in Maine, but the testimony we heard was that the retaliatory provision in the private right of action is not serving Mainers well. So why would we be extending it? Those are the first two sections of the law that are actually being repealed. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Representative Rader.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here, Mr. Austin. You referenced retaliatory action being already provided for under OSHA, but that specifically talks about concerns about hazards or violations of various workplace safety and health, airline, commercial, motor carrier, consumer product, environmental, financial reform, food safety, health insurance reform, motor vehicle safety, nuclear pipeline, public transportation agency, railroad, maritime, and securities laws. So that's specifically regarding health and hazards in the workplace. It doesn't address things like being retaliated against for wanting to take time off. Could you explain a little bit more about how that OSHA provision covers things in your mind?
I'm sorry if I gave you a misimpression. I didn't say or mean to leave the impression that it covered the topics in this bill. What I meant to say is the two provisions do not have to be linked. That is a retaliatory provision and private right of action. And so by analogy, there's an anti-retaliatory provision that does not have a private right of action. It has DOL enforcement. So it's a structural comment. It's not that provision covers everything in labor law. That was not my point. Sorry if I was unclear.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Austin? Just a quick clarifying for folks. It's just, I believe what Mr. Mason was talking about is that the FMLA provisions failed for retaliation of a positive action, for example, granting the leave and then retaliating, that there was no mechanism for that. That would be correct under the law, would it not? That you're not able to use that provision for retaliation after being granted the leave.
Can you state the question again?
That's okay. I believe, yeah. So if the employer grants the leave, but then the teacher is not renewed next year, right? Then the retaliatory does, you can't link the two because the employer granted the leave. There was a positive action legally. And so, right. And so that, I believe that's what he was talking about. So,
but there's a prohibition in statute, and it's what's being repealed in Section 847. The employer may not discharge, fine, suspend, expel, discipline, or in any other manner discriminate for exercising the right. I would think, as Representative Geer sort of asked, isn't that the statute the legislature gave you to defend yourself in those circumstances? And if that's not working, why are we extending it? I don't know. I'm not a labor lawyer.
Yeah. No problem. That would be a lengthy discussion, and that I'd be happy to have down some other rabbit hole. But thank you for thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
All right. Next is Jessica LaLiberty.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Jessica LaLiberty. I'm the Policy Relations Manager for the Manufacturers Association of Maine. We are a nonpartisan, pro-growth, pro-manufacturing industry organization representing about 400 manufacturing businesses in our great state and the 29,000 workers they employ. Several of our member companies are employee-owned or ESOP companies. I'm here today in opposition of LD 1338, an act to protect employees' exercise of workplace rights. This proposed legislation covers all of Chapter 7 of Title 26, which includes not only the Family and Medical Leave Statute, but also all wage and hour statutes, the Whistleblower Protection Act, and Maine's Drug Testing Statute. These statutes included within Chapter 7 include a multitude of remedies, as well as an oversight by administrative agencies, including the Department of Labor and the Maine Human Rights Commission. This proposed legislation, however, removes those agencies from the mix and provides employees with a direct avenue to litigation. As an example, an employer with 20 employees paints its break room, and after the job is completed, the notice informing employees of the illegality of sexual harassment is not immediately replaced. The policy handbook maintains sexual harassment is illegal, but the poster is not present for a month period of time. In this circumstance, an employee could file a class action lawsuit against the company and receive up to $3,100 each, plus pay their own attorney's fees and the attorney fees of their employee. Thus, this good faith accidental oversight could cost the company well in excess of $65,000. Further, in offering employees direct access to the court, the Maine Human Rights role as a gatekeeper for Maine's Whistleblower Protection Act cases is gutted, as the bill does not consider the current work the DOL and the Maine Human Rights Commission are currently performing to enforce statutes within Chapter 7. The manufacturers in Maine support 29,000 employees and their families. We strive to maintain safe, compliant, and healthy work environments for all of our employees. Bills such as LD 1338, however, which allow employees to run directly to the court for any perceived or unintentional violation of Chapter 7, Title 26, will have unintended consequences, increase the legal spend that Maine manufacturers have to pay, and generally decrease the attractiveness of doing business in the state of Maine. The Manufacturers Association of Maine opposes LD 1338, an act to protect employees' exercise of workplace rights, as we see it as an anti-growth bill, and it does nothing to help our state grow its workforce, attract new businesses, nor increase GDP, chief goals of the economic strategy of the state of Maine. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Liberty. Right on time, perfect. Are there any questions for Ms. Liberty? Representative Rader.
I apologize. My dog is barking in the background, so I'm going to try to get this out quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Liberty. The example you mentioned about the sexual harassment poster being missing for 30 days and leading to a lawsuit, how large a problem is it that employees are rushing to sue under these sorts of circumstances? It seems like there is a picture being painted of employees being generally looking to get money from the company that perhaps they can only acquire through lawsuits. So I was just wondering what kind of stories and or evidence that you have that that is a growing problem.
It's an example to highlight what this proposed legislation could do for industry.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Liberty? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Appreciate you. Last we have for the folks opposed to this bill is Peter Gore. And then we will move to Mike Rowland, who is speaking neither for nor against.
Good morning, Representative Sylvester and esteemed members of the Labor and Housing Committee. I am Peter Gore. I'm the Executive Vice President at the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and we are in opposition to LD 1338. The bill substitutes decades of workplace protection policy with a one-size-fits-all approach, emphasizing litigation or the fear of litigation, and saying that all Chapter 7 violations could be the subject of such. And they're whether purposeful or whether they are inadvertent. The bill doesn't discriminate between the two. Which means the impact of 1338 falls harder on small businesses in Maine. In fact, the smaller the business, the bigger the problem, because they are less likely to have systems in place to guard against minor process violation, tactical noncompliance that deals with every employment regulation in Title 26. And every violation or even alleged violations could be the subject of litigation, court costs, penalties, and settlements in order to be done within extended and protracted trials. And the beneficiaries are lawyers who will be incentivized to bring more cases to court. And I think I heard former Representative Mason say that. And my experience in workers' compensation when it comes to litigation is if you build it, they will come. In addition, LD 1338 enacts proposes to Chapter 7 that may well conflict with other protections and policies within the Act, including a bill that was most recently approved by this committee, LD 1666, which makes changes to Chapter 7. The bill proposes these changes go into effect, then asks the Department of Labor to clean up any conflicts through rulemaking. But what will happen to the claims that are filed in between? In the interim, we think this is backwards. We are unaware of widespread egregious violations of employment law that this bill implies are taking place. And much of what has been discussed today is concern for the future. But for instance, the earned paid leave law is less than 100 days old. If the committee believes it's time for review of Chapter 7, then our suggestion would be to task the Department of Labor with forming a stakeholder group to review the law and report back to the committee with recommendations. LD 1338 is drafted presumes to place all Maine businesses in the position of constantly denying rights to these workers and looking for every opportunity to punish them through fewer hours, discipline, or even discharge. Nothing could be further from the truth. The workforce shortages that were in place pre-pandemic exist post-pandemic. Abusing workers and firing workers when they so desperately need them is as an absolute anathema to employers, especially small businesses. What this bill does do in place of enforcement of labor laws, it places the enforcement of labor laws, in the hands of trial attorneys. And we believe, wouldn't they rather, and we would rather, and we would think you do too, be in the hands of regulators who are tasked with education and compliance and enforcement rather than punishment. We urge you to reject 1338, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Gore. Are there any questions for Mr. Gore? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we are moving to those testifying neither for nor against, and we have Director Rowland.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Representative Sylvester and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. I'm Mike Rowland, Director of the Bureau of Labor Standards, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of the department, neither for nor against LD 1338. The department recognizes significant value in this proposal's intent to create uniform provisions to deter retaliation by employers against employees for exercising or attempting to exercise their rights under Title 26, Chapter 7. Currently, unlike the Civil Rights Act or public employer state and health laws, safety and health laws, there is no uniform prohibition throughout Maine's wage and hour law of retaliation. And we believe that uniformity would be helpful to efforts made by the Bureau of Labor Standards, not only to enforce these statutes, but also to educate workers and employers about their rights and responsibilities under Maine employment law. That said, enforcement would be entirely by private action, so that the department would have little ability to ensure the effectiveness of the proposed section of law. Though we would, of course, adopt rules as instructed to implement the statute, it would be difficult to prescribe in such rules how and when an employer might sue an employee might sue an employer, nor could we presume to control judicial enforcement through the rules. However, Maine Department of Labor could issue a rule further defining the types of actions that are violations. For example, do they include schedules, benefits, or assignments? And we could also consider whether a worker must lose money for the retaliatory action to be covered. The penalty of $100 a day provided in the bill also presents a bit of a problem. While it might be appropriate for a violation, for instance, of the Family Medical Leave Act, from which it's derived, it doesn't easily translate effectively to other wage and hour violations. For example, is the penalty for retaliatory termination of employment $100 in total, $100 per day until the worker finds a new job, or some other construct? While questions such as these might ultimately be decided by a court, we'd recommend considering a more clearly defined approach. On another point, the department would appreciate clearer direction regarding the review required by the bill of resulting inconsistencies in the law. The department would suggest instead carrying this bill over to the next session, and we would be more than willing to convene a stakeholder group that reviews Chapter 7 and returns to the committee in the second session. I see my time is up.
Thank you, Director Rowland.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. And I'm just going, I see the couple hands up. I'm going to use the chair's prerogative to make, because I think that this is going to clear up a lot of things. Would you explain what the scope of your enforcement is right now under the current law, given the Attorney General's letter? So what are your rights to enforce the law under the way that it's written currently?
Now, which law? Are we talking about the entire chapter?
Just earned time off.
Earned paid leave, yes. I noticed that a lot of the discussion centered around that, although, as you know, this bill proposes to affect much more than that one section of law. Under the earned paid leave law, newly implemented, our attempts or our interest, I would say, in writing rules that would allow the prevention of retaliation by an employer for an employee's attempt to exercise their rights under that statute. Our interest was limited by advice from the Attorney General, on which we rely, from the Attorney General's office, that we could not write such a rule, or rather that if we were to include such a rule in our adopted rule, that it would likely be struck down by a court at the first opportunity, because it's not included in the statute. So it would be an overreach.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative Rader and then Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, Mr. Rowland. I have a very quick question for you. It's just clarification. You mentioned that there is no uniformity in the laws about retaliation. Is that correct?
Within Chapter 7, there are some statutes that include anti-retaliation provisions, others that do not, many that do not, and they vary quite a bit along each section.
Great. Are you able to talk a little bit about what some of those gaps are, or is it just too big?
I could. I don't have the document in front of me, but we did do a quick thumbnail analysis of which statutes include and which don't include anti-retaliation measures and what those measures are, but in brief description. And I can provide that to you, or I can describe it to you in work session if you prefer. Right now, I just don't have it right in front of me. But it is, like I said, it varies quite a bit within the chapter.
I would personally love to see that document, and I read better than I listen sometimes. So if you could provide that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you shall have it.
Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Rowland, for being here. A while back, I think in another hearing, we heard a figure on the number of rules or laws regarding employer-employee relationships pursuant to when a employer could be held accountable either through fines or some other type of remedy. Do we have that somewhere, or is there a number somewhere? Am I remembering incorrectly?
No, I think you're remembering correctly, and I think there are different numbers depending on exactly what we're looking at. I mean, there are X number of sections of law within Chapter 7, and it's well over 100. On the other hand, some of them are sort of part of a bundle or a subchapter that could be categorized together. I think the last I heard, maybe 70 or 80 of those separate types of statutes or laws, subchapters. So the number varies, but it's a lot, I guess. And I could get you more accurate account if I knew exactly what number you're looking for.
Okay, I think we had something in a previous bill.
Yep.
I'm not sure which one, but that would be more than sufficient for me. I'm just trying to get a grasp on how many laws an employer has to recognize and adhere to before he's in violation of some employee relationship.
I do remember having a number like that I can't remember what bill it was, but I'll take a look and I'll get it to you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. And Steve, if you have any thoughts without having to go through every bill we heard to help the good representative and the director figure that out. Representative Drinkwater.
Thank you, sir. While we're asking for information, I've heard 2 or 3 times this AG's opinion mentioned. I would personally like to read that opinion. If we could get that provided to us, maybe through our analyst.
I'll do what I can.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions for the director? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Rowland.
Thank you. I'll see you later.
Thank you. I see no one else to testify. Am I correct in that, Alyssa?
Yeah, that's correct.
Then I will close the public hearing on LD 1338 and open the public hearing on LD 1402, an act to remove a requirement regarding payment of union fees. And is the sponsor here?
It doesn't look like it.
All right, why don't we take it is currently 11:37. Let's come back 11:45, give everybody a stretch break and go refill your coffee and what you need to do. And we'll be back at 11:45 while we reach out to the sponsor. Folks, if you're around, if you could pop in for a second. All right, well, you can fill in. Oh, there's Representative Gear, there's Representative Bradstreet. Perfect. So we have been unable to find Representative Steckes, and so I am going to be at ease for another few minutes. I'm going to do my best to try to reach out and find him and or confer with Chair Hickman about how he wants to proceed. I'll be back in a...
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Representative Bradstreet.
Yeah, I did just send you a text. I was notified by a legislative aide that Representative Steckes will not be able to testify today and has asked that the bill be tabled.
Unfortunately, we were unable to table a live public hearing without approval of both the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, and notice of a day, and almost all of them have been rejected because of the schedule that we're under.
Okay.
So let me confer with Senator Hickman, and I'll be back momentarily.
Thank you.
All righty, we are back. So as Representative Steckes will not be here, and he did not notify either of the chairs that he will not be here. He didn't seem to supply written testimony in the documents that are there. So we are going to go forward with the hearing. We will call our first speaker, who is Jacob Posick, who is the only person listed speaking in favor. And I will welcome Mr. Posick to the
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Posick. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, distinguished members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Jake Posick, and I serve as the Director of Communications at Maine Policy Institute, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that advocates for individual liberty and economic freedom in Maine. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify in support of LD 1402 on this very windy Friday morning. LD 1402 would remove language in Maine law that unconstitutionally tells public employees who choose not to be a member of their workplace union that they can be required to pay a portion of dues for, quote, representational activities, unquote, also known as agency fees, to that union. This bill is simple. It would bring Maine law into compliance with Supreme Court precedent. Since the ruling in Janus v. AFSCME in June 2018, public workers cannot be required to financially support their workplace union as a condition of employment. This decision specifically struck down agency fees, which were previously allowed under the High Court's decision in Abood. Specifically, the Janus ruling states, and I quote, "The First Amendment is violated when money is taken from non-consenting employees for a public sector union. Employees must choose to support the union before anything is taken from them. Accordingly, neither an agency fee nor any other form of payment to a public sector union may be deducted from an employee, nor may any other attempt be made to collect such a payment unless the employee affirmatively consents to pay," unquote. Maine law currently conflicts with this ruling by stating that public employees in Maine, quote, "may be," unquote, required to pay agency fees to a union. To be clear, under no circumstances can a public employee in this state or in any state be compelled to pay any dues, fees, or other charges to a public sector union without affirmatively consenting to pay. This bill should be a quick, easy, and painless fix. Maine law is not in compliance with the Janus decision, and public employees in Maine deserve to know that they cannot be legally required to support an organization of which they do not want to become a member. Please deem LD 1402 ought to pass to remove this conflict between Maine law and prevailing Supreme Court precedent, and to affirm the First Amendment rights of public sector workers to choose not to be involved with the union in their workplace. Thank you very much for your time and consideration, and I will do my best to answer any questions that you may have.
Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This actually is not necessarily a question directed to Mr. Posick, but I was in conversation with the sponsor, and he just wanted to get this on the record, so we're fine. He's fine with that. I just wanted to use this bill as a vehicle to prompt the Attorney General to give the ruling or an advisory on what Mr. Posick just stated, that we're in violation of federal law, as demonstrated by the Janus ruling. And I think that it's very important constitutionally for that to happen. So I think Mr. Posick made some very good points. I hope we do continue with this. I was going to sponsor a similar bill. I actually did propose one last year, but it did not make it through legislative council. So that's all I have to say about that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing the words of the sponsor forward to the committee. Representative Drinkwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you just again cite that case, Janus v. what was that case again?
It's Janus v. AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, I believe, if I got that acronym correct. And that was a June 28 Supreme Court, 2018 Supreme Court ruling.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Representative Warren.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. Maybe it's just a personal perspective, but I am curious on the Janus decision. Do you feel that this is the best way to achieve the goal of maybe getting that ultimate judgment, or do you feel that this is because I would wonder if maybe a lawsuit would be more appropriate, is maybe my question. And I'm wondering from your expertise and with your organization, if you feel this is, I guess, how do you reason that out if you believe it's just something that's unconstitutional, right, actively now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we necessarily need to go about the way of necessarily getting the courts involved. As I mentioned in my testimony, I think this should be a pretty quick and simple fix. Right now, as it relates to the 4 different provisions of Maine law related to public sector employees who have a right not to join a union, the second half of those statutes all say that they might be required to pay agency fees. And so in the ruling, the court said that you cannot be required to pay not only agency fees, but any other type of payment to a public sector union without affirmatively consenting to pay. And so all we want is Maine law to reflect what the Supreme Court has ruled. And so any public sector employee who seeks to review Maine law and find out exactly what their rights are, their First Amendment rights, that Maine law reflects what their true First Amendment rights are as decided by the Supreme Court. So it's news to me related to whether or not the AG can or is planning to do anything related to a union, a ruling or an opinion on this. I would prefer for this committee to just strike the second clause of all 4 of those sections outlined in the bill. I hope that answers your question.
Bless you, Representative Drinkwater. And are there any other questions for Mr. Posick? I see all, Representative. I have a couple questions, Mr. Posick. So the sponsor's note raises an interesting question because it does, and it's basically this. Does the Janus decision say that this is now the law of the land for all bargaining units of all public sector avenues, or does it actually say that it's the decision on these workers and that it may be applicable to other public sector workers?
To my understanding, it freed every public sector employee in the country of the requirement to pay any sort of dues, fees, or other payments to a union as a condition of employment, though I will admittedly say that I am not a lawyer, but that is my understanding anyway.
Very good. I accept that that is your understanding. All right. Are there any other questions for Mr. Posick? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And we will now bring James Durkin in, and then Alyssa, you can go ahead and let in Adam Good, Jeff McCabe, and Michael Kraus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You hear me?
We hear you and see you, or we don't quite see you, but we hear you, and you have the floor.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Jim Durkin here today on behalf of AFSCME Council 93. And just here to raise some important concerns we have with this legislation. If the goal of the legislation is, in fact, to place state statute in sync with the Janus Supreme Court decision, then the committee should know that, in our opinion, this bill as drafted misses the mark. In fact, based on language included in the court's written decision, it may run counter to something the court expressly stated in its decision. If you look at the 49-page written decision of the majority, you'll see that the court talks about how they don't want to see any attempt by unions to negotiate members-only contracts that would deny people who choose not to pay union dues the same wages, benefits, and working conditions as dues-paying members. And the opinion notes that the union's designation as the exclusive representative, quote, confers many benefits, and that status gives the union a privileged place in negotiations over wages, benefits, and working conditions, so, end quote. However, the court treats representing non-members in grievance proceedings differently, expressly stating on page 17, quote again, individual non-members could be required to pay for that service or could be denied representation altogether. So our concern is that by striking the identical language in sections 1 through 4 of the bill, that may eliminate the union's option to charge fees associated with representation and grievances, which would clearly run counter to the court's decision on Janus. Why? Well, the language that would be stricken in this bill talks about union costs that are, quote, germane to the organization's representational activities. And we believe some could make an argument that germane activities go beyond negotiating wages, benefits, and working conditions and could, in fact, include representation and grievances. Now, it's important to note that although we currently have the option of charging those fees, at this time, we're not exercising that option. But we do agree with the conservative majority on the court that we and all of the unions should retain that option. The cost of representing a worker in a grievance can be quite significant, especially if the matter goes all the way to arbitration. And it's one thing for dues-paying members to have to accept that those who don't pay dues receive the same pay increases and benefits in a contract, but it's another thing entirely to ask them to accept that thousands of dollars in their dues money, the equivalent of years of one worker's annual dues, could be spent in just a few days on arbitration proceedings defending a worker who has never contributed a single penny in dues. So I'll end there. I thank you for your time and consideration, and we'll do my best to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Durkin. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Durkin? Mr. Durkin, I have one. Right now, if an employer, public sector employer, wanted to challenge those pieces being in the contract, could they do that by negotiating it out, or could they similarly bring a grievance forward in order to have that language brought out into arbitration and or bring it in the courts?
I don't believe so. I would have to consult with my colleagues here. It's the negotiation of contracts is not my area for the union, but I don't believe so. But I will say that where this kind of surfaced was when former Governor LePage repeatedly over a couple of years before the Supreme Court decision put out two wage offers in the contract. One was, a decent wage if we voluntarily gave up agency fee, and the other was basically nothing if we didn't. The first time he did it, we rejected it. We got a contract ratified. The second time that we did it, we rejected it again. But other unions did accept that, and as a result, partly as a result, the contract was not ratified. So when we went back to the table, we reached a new agreement, but we let members know that these fees could be a possibility going forward, and there was certainly no objection back then. If that helps you at all, Mr. Chairman.
It does. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, Mr. Durkin? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Next, we will bring in Adam Good, followed by Jeff McCabe, followed by Michael Kraus. All of these speaking neither for nor against.
Adam Good and Michael Kraus are okay not testifying. Mr. Good left and Michael Kraus said so.
Oh, okay, great.
So we just have Jeff McCabe.
Yep, okay, great. Mr. McCabe.
Thank you, Chair Sylvester, members of the Labor and Housing Committee. Good afternoon. Jeff McCabe. I serve as the Legislative and Political Director for Maine Service Employees Association. We signed up today neither for nor against this bill. We were hoping to get a little bit of clarity from the bill sponsor in regards to what the actual problem here in Maine might be, and is there currently a problem for folks that might feel that they somehow had an issue. So, beyond that, I think that we did hear one person speak in favor of this bill. And it did seem in the conversation that the bill before you may be too descriptive and broader than the Janus decision. And I did appreciate earlier a couple of the folks asking for information around the Janus decision. And it sounds like the committee will take a look at that as well. And you did hear from Mr. Durkin, who did provide a great deal of information in a summary. And I did just want to get on and say that we at MSCA and our members actually negotiated away agency fee, as you heard a little bit about, in an effort to get a larger wage from the previous administration. So, often I get questions in regards to if things can be done through collective bargaining. And, it seems that the legislature often wants to go that route versus legislating. And that was a decision that the members of MSCA made several contracts ago, was to actually negotiate away agency fee. And at that time, it seemed to be the appropriate choice for the members, and a decision was made to do that. But really just was jumping on today to get a little bit of clarity. And so here we are. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Are there any questions for Mr. McCabe? I have one quick question, and I know this is before you were with MSCA that Fair Share was put in. But if we could get this for the work session, my understanding is that the legislature passed a law that allowed for Fair Share, but that MSCA still had to negotiate that into their contracts. similar to the way that they negotiated it out of the contract in the wage clause. And so, so I would just like to get clarification that that was the correct. The law gave the opportunity to negotiate that in. It didn't mandate it to go in. Then the union negotiated it in. The union negotiated it out. And if you could verify that to Steve, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, and I'll try to get some years and contracts around that as well.
Thank you. And yeah, we appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. McKay. So Alyssa, is Michael Kraus here or no?
He is here, but he said that he'll pass because his views were expressed by Mr. Durkin.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much. Then I see nobody else to testify, and I therefore close the public hearing on LD 1402. That concludes, oh, Representative Bradstreet.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't get my hand up quite quickly enough, I guess. But I'm wondering if for the work session, we can have an opinion from the Attorney General as to whether or not Maine's current law complies with the rulings in the Janus case. We're not really talking here about the efficacy of the right to work or fair share or any of that. We should be talking about whether or not our current laws comply with federal law. And I think the only proper way to do that would be to get the Attorney General to give us an opinion on that. Is it proper to ask for that for the work session?
It's certainly proper to ask for it. I don't know whether or not the Attorney General would be willing to do so. You know, I know that we've asked before and been told that they don't have an opinion, but we'll certainly, I'd be happy to make that call and ask Representative if we sent a letter, if they would be able to give us an opinion on it, because I think there is no clear opinion. State to state is the answer to that. And I don't want to open a work session here in order, you know, in our discussions. Since I closed the public hearing, but I will be happy to ask. And if it seems proper, then I'll bring that back to the committee.
Okay, can you CC me on that as well then? The letter in a response. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I will CC the whole committee if. So that concludes our public hearings for the day. We are scheduled to come back at 12:30 in order to give staff time to have lunch. Why don't we actually come back at 12:45 and we will open our work sessions at that time. And remembering that you have to go to the different link in order to come in, and you'll find that in your email, and reach out to Alyssa if you have any problems. All right.